How's everyone doing? Happy Climate Week, yeah? It's Friday of Climate Week, everyone. Give yourselves a round of applause. You made it. You made it through, my friends. I'm barely standing, but that's okay. I'm kidding. I've been really energized by this week. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Danny Nierenberg. I am co-founder with Bernard Pollock, who is roaming around somewhere, of Food Tank. Hi, Bernard. Which is a research and advocacy organization devoted to telling stories of hope and success in food and agriculture systems around the globe. We do this with the aim to inspire, motivate, and ultimately activate positive transformation in how we produce and consume food. I'm so delighted to be in this particular space. It's the 100th anniversary of WNYC. Please give them a round of applause. And I'm really excited about this summit on the role that technology can play in creating creating affordable, nutritious food, and the role it can have in helping prevent food waste. All really important things. And I will introduce my heroine, Karen Washington, in just a second. Before I do that, I want to thank the partners who made today possible. Flashfood, give them a round of applause. Apeel, give them a round of applause. Refed, give them a round of applause. And Divert, round of applause. What great partners to work with, all great collaborators, and I'm thrilled that we could do this. Before we jump into conversation, a little bit of housekeeping. If I cut somebody off or I cut a panel short, please forgive me later. We're trying to create a really dynamic environment here where we can have real conversation and be blunt and honest and transparent with one another. We don't have breaks built in, so step out when you need to. Be quiet though when you step out there, and get air and water and whatever. I also hope that you'll join the conversation by using the hashtag ClimateWeekNYC to share the content with others. If you have any critiques or suggestions, my phone is right over there, and I'll be checking it when I'm not on stage, and you can email me at danielle@foodtank.com, and I'll try to respond in real time. So now I'm thrilled to introduce Karen Washington. She's really a woman who needs no introduction here in New York. She's a farmer and owner at Rise and Root Farm. She's an amazing advocate, mentor, educator. I could go on and on, but she knows how much I love and adore her. Please give her a round of applause. Karen, I've had the opportunity to listen to you over the years. You've taught me personally so much, and one of the things that stands out for me is you told me that communities don't need people who look like me to come into their spaces and tell them what to do. What they need is capital, and they need investment. How do we change the paradigm that exists where we're telling communities what they need and what to do?
Yes, so we should start off by asking communities what they want instead of what they need, because asking us what we want comes from a position of deficit. Need comes from a position of deficit. Ask us what we want comes from a position of power. And so for years, I've been sort of trying to bring that to the forefront. And then also, we don't need parachuters. We don't need people to tell us what to do. We need people to listen to what the community wants. And so I have been on this mission to make sure that voices and people that look like me have a seat at the table. And if we don't have a seat at the table, we're gonna make our own table and have our own table and chairs. And so that's what it's all about.
You've definitely made your own table, but it's important that folks who do look like you, and especially young folks who look like you, have that space and that voice. Have you seen enough of that this week during Climate Week?
Oh, without a doubt. It's been really, really inspirational to see people, but also see diversity. For so long, spaces when it came to climate change was homogenized, sort of. And so now you're starting to see more people of color, because people of color are being affected. When it comes to climate change, hunger and poverty, we know where the impact is going to be.
Yeah.
And it's mostly going to be in poor neighborhoods, both urban and rural, and people of color.
Yeah, I think there's still this sort of unrealization that the people most affected by climate change will be poor folks, especially farmers, black and brown folks all over the world. And we need to sort of change that sort of misconception. And you're right about, like, it's usually men in suits who are on these stages telling the rest of us what to do.
Yeah, now it's women.
It's great. It's great. Give that a round of applause, everyone. Karen, one of the things that you've said is you've called growing food an act of resistance. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think because it's like if you look at food justice and food sovereignty. So for me, food justice is the transformation of the food system to eliminate some of the disparities that we see. And for me, food justice is a movement. I live in the boogie down Bronx, and I have the fast food, the junk food, the processed food. What I don't have are healthy food options. That's number one. And number two is, like, you know, people in the desert was saying that they have food, and then I saw that the word started to change from food desert to food mirage and food swamp. And I'm saying, come on, folks. No one was really talking about the root causes of what was happening in a food system that wasn't for us or by us. And so I wanted people to start having a hard conversation about the food system. And let's be honest, folks. Everybody knows where the crappy food goes. Everyone knows where the organic, nice food goes. Everyone knows where poor housing is and where people live. And everybody knows where people with privilege and power live. But we don't talk about that. We don't talk about how we integrate the food system with social issues. So for me, I realized that, you know what? In my community garden at the time, when I was hearing so many social issues, I realized, well, Karen, you just can't focus on food alone. That there were so many social issues that I had to sort of contend with. Social issues around the environment, high asthma, health, diet-related diseases, economic, poor wages, and education, poor education. And so these are things that for me was a catalyst in the work that I was doing, why I try to use that word, food apartheid. Don't use that word, food deserts, around me.
Yeah, bravo to that. Thank you. Because I think what I've come across a lot this week is people trying to change the semantics of how we talk about these things and the vocabulary. Words really matter when we're talking about the climate crisis and when we're talking about people.
Yes, well, as you know, words do matter because we have a particular person who has really that's something detrimental, I want to say, about a group of people in these United States and how it has impacted people. Words make a difference. Certain words hurt. And for me, as a farmer, what I'm trying to do is look at farming in terms of increasing diversity. And I say that because as a black woman, as a black farmer in New York State, out of 57,000 farmers, only 100, maybe now 39 or 40, 140 are black. And then when you try to instill and let people understand that there is a lack of land and resources and opportunities, then you get farmers that are saying, well, you know what, we can't give to black farmers because it's reverse racism. And I say to those farmers out there, we pride ourselves on diversity. We pride ourselves on looking at different fruits and vegetables and color and that diversity. And when it comes to our animals, our diversity, why can't you stand behind us to make sure that the agricultural system has a diversity of different colors and ethnicity of their farmers and farm workers?
Bravo. Yeah, it's not just diversity of what we eat, it's diversity of practices, thought, people, it's all of those things. I want to talk a little bit about the sort of history of violence in the food system in the United States and why folks who are black and brown don't have access to land and all of the things that you mentioned.
I think, be honest with you, I think is people with power are afraid to give it up. You know, people with power and privilege are afraid to give it up because, you know, as soon as a person of color wants to move into a all-white neighborhood, there are roadblocks. If people want to start their own business, there's roadblocks. And I think that the system is based on people's personal beliefs. They bring their bias, they bring their trauma, they bring their stress, and they bring their fear. They bring their fear, and a lot of it stems from what is seen in the media. I could tell you so I live two lives. So I live the black life and I live part of the white life. And I say life, and I say that because I worked in spaces where it was predominantly white. I live in spaces where predominantly people of color, but there are a majority of whites that have never set foot in a community of color. And so their reference is what they see and hear on the media. And a lot of that is portrayed in violence. You know, if you turn on the TV, all you're going to see is a person of color, you know, doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, and that puts fear. And so as a result, you have a group of people saying, you know, I don't want those type of people. Everyone know when they say those type of people in my neighborhood. So they, like I said, words hurt. But what I want people to understand is that the American dream is for everyone to have an opportunity to live in freedom, to live without fear, to be able to have a roof over their head, food that they can feed their family. People are trying to survive to do that, but yet there are roadblocks and there's institutions that block that. And so what you have, a system of the haves and the have-nots, you have the systems of whites versus black, you have this sort of, this system that polarizes the human element of what makes us human.
Yeah.
And so, again, people with power and privilege that centers that power and privilege that don't want to give it up stand in the way. But when I tell people with power and privilege, you got three options. Number one, you could give it up. And some people are doing that. They're giving up their land. They understand that, you know, it's important to give up land. You can share it. A lot of people are sharing their land, their resources. Or the third one is going to be taken away from you, and it's going to be the new revolution. And I say that because you cannot continue to push and push and push people out of housing, out of food, out of water, and eventually out of air without them revolting. And so let's not get to that point, because there's going to come a time when, you know, it's like, you know, people are being displaced when it comes to gentrification. People are being displaced, and people look back and say, you know what, I used to live there, but I no longer live there. Now I'm on the street. And if you get a group of people and a population of people that continue to look back where they were because of the opulence and privilege of some people, then there's going to be a massive revolt. And so from my lips to God's ears, you don't want that to happen, but you have to understand the pressure that so many people, poor people, are having today.
Right on. Thank you so much, Karen. I want to flip the conversation a little bit, because you've done so much good work here in New York City, and I want to give you a chance to talk about some of those community-led projects and what you've seen sort of unfold in the food and agriculture space here in New York.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, this morning at 9 o'clock, I had a meeting with the head of FSA. A couple of months ago, the USDA is now getting into urban ag. I don't know what took them so long to get into urban ag. And so the head of FSA was there talking about some of the programs that they have. So I just went up to him and I said, you need to come out to my farm and see what's going on. And sure enough, he came. 9 o'clock he came, because they do have programs that are for farmers. But again, we have to teach the USDA, especially beginning farmers, is that we don't need loans, we need grants. That's number one. And then when it comes to technology, we need technology that's affordable. Okay, we need technology that's affordable. And then we also need training. You know, we need training, education, and assistance. So those are the things that I was bringing with him. And so what has changed from me starting my community garden back in 1988 is now people are talking about urban agriculture. They're talking about it more. It's not just community gardens, and it's not, well, you know, there's these big companies that are doing agro-tech, which is all well and good, but how can we use urban ag as a broad scope of innovation, of people that are doing the work to help feed people? Because for so long I felt that it was people with power and privilege were saying, we have the essence, we have the solution. And it's like, wait a second, we've been growing food for so long, you can't just push us to the side. So now what you're starting to see, especially with government, is like they're listening to all sorts of people that are trying to grow food in an innovative way. There's a place for all of us. In this great country, we should not have hunger and poverty. We shouldn't. And so if there are ways that we can stem the tide of hunger and poverty, it's just long as that everybody has, like I said, a seat at the table, then we can end something that for so long we have been dealing with. I am 70 years old. I got the gray hair, I got the scars, and it's time for us to start thinking about how to end hunger and poverty in a way, because we grow enough food, y'all. You know we grow enough food. And that food is wasted. And so how do we get it so that everybody has a right to healthy food, clean water, a place over their head, and to be safe, to feel safe with one another. So I'm still on this trek. You know, they call me Mama K now because of the age and the gray hair. And so what I'm trying to do is be the vessel for the next generation of people that's coming behind me so I can open these doors a little bit, and they're going to break the doors wide open for change to happen. And I'm excited about that.
Thank you for opening those doors for so many folks. You mentioned the value of food, and it seems to me like a few years ago when we were in the midst of the pandemic that there was a greater appreciation among a lot more folks for all of the labor and love and time and people that go into creating what ends up on our plates. Do you think we've lost that? Do you think we've forgotten what we learned?
We always tend to go back to what we feel is comfortable. I remember at a time where who were the essential workers? They were the farmers, the food workers, the laborers. They were the essential workers. And now, people are, again, starting to feel comfortable, but don't be too comfortable, because I think what COVID opened Pandora's box of what it may happen, could happen, probably will happen along the way. And so how do we start preparing ourselves to acknowledge how important the food industry is, how important labor is, how important the farm workers are, the meat workers, the food workers, all those people that have been neglected in a way. So we need to continue to appreciate. Every time I want people to think that something has happened to the person that puts that seed in the ground, to the plate on your food, and what happens in between that. And so we should dedicate ourselves to make sure we support small farmers, farm workers. And I always had a problem with farm workers because aren't they farmers too?
Right.
And look at wages. I was doing this research, and I cannot believe that the federal wage still is $7.90 since 2009. Folks, who can live on $7.90? Where is the outrage to that? Where's the outrage to that? So let's, get on board to make sure that, the cost and value of food is so important. And I tell people that I'm a farmer. My food isn't free, that there's a cost. There's a cost behind it. There's a cost and value. And I want people to understand that we work hard as farmers and growers, and there's a cost and value to that work that we do.
Absolutely. Thank you. Karen, I've been ending each of these panels, or most of them, with a call to action. We're in a really politicized time right now. You mentioned that one person who says some really violent words. What is your call to action for folks right now when everything's so uncertain?
Make yourself feel uncomfortable to be comfortable. Share a meal with somebody that you don't know. Do some shopping for someone that need. What I would do during the holidays is that I would be at in a grocery store, and I can see a person struggling, and I would just go up and say, I'm going to pay for their groceries. Do a little extra. The people in your neighborhood who are hungry. Feed them, invite them over. When people say, well, how do you get people in your community garden? The best way is through food. Have a barbecue, have a meal, do something exciting, and bring people from different ethnicities at the table and start talk. We don't talk to one another. We're busy talking like with the emails and TikTok and all that kind of stuff and Instagram and all that kind of stuff, that we've lost that contact of a seat at the table. Let's start doing that. Let's start inviting people at our table, and let's start talking to one another.
I love it. What a perfect point to end on, Karen. Thank you, Mama Kay.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. More applause for Karen Washington. Every time she kills it. I am now excited to introduce our next panel on food access and affordability. Moderating this discussion is the amazing and wonderful Shata Chakraborty, the CEO of We Don't Have Time North America. Give her a big round of applause as she makes it to the stage. Joining her, we have Brandon Lombardi, the Chief Sustainability Officer and Chief Legal Officer of Sprouts Farmers Markets. Julia DeSantis, the Head of Sustainability at the Farm Link Project. Nicholas Bertram, who is the CEO and President of Flashfood. And Erica Tiam, who is the Chief Supply Chain Officer of Feeding America. Give it up for all of them, please. Hey.
Okay, this is a very fancy setup. I am so thrilled to be moderating this panel, and as somebody who has seen Food Tank evolve over the years, I must say this is definitely one of my favorite spaces. And one thing that stayed the same regardless of where Food Tank moves to is the crowd. The room is always filled, so thank you all for showing up and engaging. It's the last day of the week, and so I think this first Fireside Chat really set the energy, and we're going to keep that energy up. And all of you, please continue to stay attentive, because these conversations, as you all know, are super critical. So it's no coincidence that New York Climate Week is happening simultaneously to the United Nations General Assembly. We know that food and climate is inextricably linked to many of the issues that are being discussed right now at the UN. We're hearing about conflict all over the world. We're hearing about geopolitical issues. We're hearing about food insecurity, global food insecurity. And so all of these things are definitely made worse by the planet warming. And if we don't address them in our own homes, if we don't address them locally, how can we solve them globally? So I'm really excited to have this conversation, talking about what's happening domestically, but bringing it to this bigger global picture. And it really does come down to food insecurity. We are not going to have stability on this planet if we have hungry populations. So that's what we're going to be getting into: access, security, availability of food. And I'm thrilled to have experts on this stage who work in this space day in and day out. So everyone's been introduced, so I'm not going to waste any more time introducing. Everyone's very Googleable, right? So please look everyone up and get connected, stay in touch. It's one of those communities, right? We all work together ultimately. So I'm going to throw this first question to you, Erica. You stated this fact, which just blows my mind, is that in the United States, food insecurity impacts 1 in 7 people and 1 in 5 children. And that seems shocking. We're, what, the wealthiest country in the world? Are we still? People love to say that, regardless of who's running for office. That's a stat we hear all the time. So how is it that this is true? And then talk to us about innovations, right? There has been technological advances that can address some of this, especially digital platforms. So talk to us a little bit about some of the innovations you are actively working in to deal with this.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to take a minute and just go back and think a little bit about what Karen just said, because I think we're all going to be talking today about access for people who are food insecure. And that's really like feeding the need we feel today. But I listened to Karen, and a lot of the things she was talking about is really looking forward to how we fix that need. How do we make food more accessible in community grocery stores and farmers markets? And at Feeding America, we're not only looking at how we work on feeding the need today, but really that ending hunger journey. And I'm really delighted to be part of this panel, because together all of our organizations are working together to drive that food accessibility. Coming through the pandemic, our latest USDA numbers, like you said, are as high as they were during the pandemic. Need has not gone down for food in this country. There are a lot of factors that drive that. The economy, wages keeping up with inflation, pressure on housing, pressure on healthcare. Food insecurity is largely a symptom of other challenges families are facing. So we're working really hard. It's great to see that we have this kind of whole supply chain of activities to make sure that we are looking at technology and innovative solutions to connect food surplus. You know, we're all here on this stage to look at food and that new EPA wasted food solution. We want to keep food that companies and farmers and producers have put together, produced, that is meant to delight people. We want to keep that food in the food system for people wherever possible. So capturing that food, that surplus food, before it becomes food waste is what we're working on. And making sure that we have technology solutions that can be responsive to farmers' needs. You know, I'm sure that Julia will talk about 24/7 needs of farmers who might need help to move food, surplus food from a field or a pack house, to work with retailers, to work with their inventory control systems, to work with their markdown systems, to make sure that we're moving that food real time into community food distribution organizations. So I'm sure we'll hear a lot from this panel, the way that technology can really be an opening for access for people facing hunger.
And so, Nick, these issues have become relevant to you recently, maybe not recently, but you started the company to address food waste, but increasingly you've been thinking about access and affordability. So talk a little bit about what spurred that interest.
Yeah, it's, forgive the voice, by the way, allergy season for all. It's interesting, these weeks inspire me because of the collective impact of so many different types of organizations. And I think that's why it's important that we all spend time together. And Flashfood is an example of that, where it was really about this problem of food waste, but then you find out there's other problems that are inside of that are maybe unknown, and the access to quality food was what really came up. What we found from shoppers as this was launched and has continued to expand is that oftentimes hunger is actually hidden. You think of hunger and you think of those who are, maybe who we passed walking in today, but there's hunger that are inside of homes right now, and there's hunger for good quality food. So many people are forced to eat ultra-processed or things that are not healthy because they're inexpensive. What Flashfood has done is taken food that wasn't going to be donated, wasn't going to be done with anything other than thrown away, but it's quality and it's fresh, and gives it to people at half price, right? It's just a marketplace that's connecting food that is perfectly fine. It was just destined for a dumpster instead of somebody's stomach, and it's connecting. And it's amazing what that has inspired in us, the innovation that we're now putting into it. We thought we were solving food waste, and we are, but we're solving something that's even more important, and that's just the dignity and the access to delicious, high-quality food. And I'm looking forward to hearing about other examples throughout the rest of this panel and throughout the rest of today.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just thinking about that, it's not like this technological advancement necessarily. It's just redistributing.
It's a lovely app. I'd love to say it's the greatest technology in the history of the world. I can't exactly say that. It is a really good app. But no, these are dumb problems that should not exist, and yet they still do. And so as long as dumb problems exist, smart, committed people should still try to solve them. And that's what we're trying to do.
I love that. Thank you. So we're talking about technology. We're talking about just practical, common sense solutions to some of these things. Julia, talk to us about optimism and the role of optimism in all of this.
Sure. With climate, I feel like it's so easy to, here we go. Optimism. It's the driving force of showing up again and again when something inevitably goes awry, and there's tensions and opposing forces, but I think optimism is what reminds us of why we love food, why we continue to fight for everyone to experience the right to life. And I think optimism is what truly drives FarmLink. We were born by college students that witnessed the unraveling of the supply chain during the pandemic. A lot of us studying different things in college, and really just felt called to just start calling as many farmers as possible, just because we couldn't stop and stand by what was happening. And just to know the two truths, the reality is that there's 100 billion pounds every single year of food. We only need 8 billion a year to meet food insecurity in the United States. We could do that, right? There's plenty of resources there. There's not a scarcity. There's absolutely an abundance of resources, and therefore we should go do it. And I think that optimism of we should just dare trying is just part of the spirit of climate, because I believe climate is a movement of the celebration of life. And that's what food is the greatest vehicle for that.
I might steal some of this language. This is good. This is good. This is why we need the next generation. This is why we need these intergenerational conversations for sure. So global hunger, big challenge. Domestic hunger, big challenge. Food security issues, and just access, right? And we have technology, we have just common sense problem solving, we have next generation, hyped up, optimistic, ready to go. All right. What are you gonna add to this discussion? No, so the no.
Where do I begin?
He told me to throw whatever I wanted at him. He was like,
I'm
paint,
ready.
I can
I'm
talk
ready.
about
I'll just
paint.
take that and run. I don't even need a question.
Go for it. Go for it.
I mean, if we're talking about accessibility, affordability, affordability, not to go too broad, but it's like we've got a broken form of capitalism that creates massive inequality, and like that, we're not going to fix that here today. So like, I'm going to focus on like people don't have enough time to eat healthy. Like they work multiple jobs. Like it's just the challenges are long and hard. But in terms of like food waste, improving accessibility, I can just talk about what Sprouts Farmers Market does as a retailer. Right, we're $7.5 billion in sales. So we move a lot of food, we move a lot of produce. 20% of our business is produce. We're in 24 states, 425 stores. So I can talk about that from a retailer perspective, right? So we approach it multiple ways. We work with the farmers on the ground. We try to be as local as possible. And we try to take as much of their crop as possible. So as little goes to waste on farm as possible because we can pick up their entire crop. Now that helps us, that helps our margin because we can get it at a better cost and we can reinvest that for the consumer. And we try to take a really, really aggressive approach on pricing in produce. That's our leader. That's been our leader since day one. Back in the day, the folks who formed this company, the family that formed this company, put produce in the middle, and they said, we're going to make this really, really affordable, 10 to 30% cheaper than anywhere else, and we're going to invite people in because you can't pantry fill with produce, so it's going to get people in more often. It's healthy, and then they're going to learn our store, and they're going to hopefully learn how to eat healthier. So we do that with farmers. We also build our stores within 250 miles of our distribution center. So we have 7 distribution centers. We do that so that the food is fresher. So you reduce time on truck. It's fresher, better shrink, better margin for us, right? This is triple win stuff when you're in business, but it's fresher for the consumer. So when they buy it, it's fresher. They can bring it home. It has longer shelf life, better taste profile, less chance of it going into the garbage can. So we approach this, and then it's really a lot of discipline around operations. When you've got 33,000 people, hourly workforce, you have to have the right culture that cares about making sure that the food doesn't go into the garbage can at the end of the night. It goes into the bins in the back of the store, either compost, animal feed, or most importantly, to partners like Feeding America. So last year we donated 30 million meals to people, 400 partners linking with Feeding America. And so it's prioritization, it's everyday blocking and tackling. This stuff doesn't happen easy, and so that's what I'll start with.
No, that's great. And so these are products that we want to see on the shelves and we want to see expanded, right? And that's great because, Erica, you might need a job, and in a good way. If you're successful, we're not going to need Feeding for America anymore, right? So the entire mission ultimately is to not exist anymore because we've solved the problem. And in that case, maybe we could go work for Brandon.
We're hiring, we're growing.
Yeah.
But talk to us about this. Why make yourself obsolete?
It's easy for me to say that I hope to be out of a job. I also need to say that Feeding America has been working at this for almost 50 years. So there's a lot more work to do, and a lot of work that we all need to partner on to do. It's a big, complex problem to solve. I was thinking about listening to the technology threads through the conversation so far. Dignity, I heard access, I heard fresh, wholesome, nutritious foods that people need. My vision, I was actually in a part of Chicago called the Englewood neighborhood last week. And I was visiting a pantry that serves that community that has an accessible grocery store run by a nonprofit organization. And as I was sitting with the food bank team and this community organization, the goal was to shut down the pantry because we make the grocery store sustainably accessible for that community. So the work needs to come from many different angles. Something as basic as the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program or SNAP EBT cards used to be called food stamps when I was young. That's part of the Farm Bill that's currently being renewed right now. It's been taking a long time. But thinking about how folks who have access to SNAP benefits, one, they need to know they're eligible. I was just looking at the 5 boroughs in New York this morning. 31% of the food insecure people in this area are ineligible for SNAP benefits. So looking at benefit cliffs, looking at eligibility levels, SNAP can be good for business. SNAP can bring folks into Sprouts to shop. SNAP can be used on Flashfood products. SNAP can be used in farmers markets. So really thinking about a holistic approach for community gardens and food access and resilient food systems within communities, accessible grocery stores, and communities where it can knit into the community fabric, and benefits like SNAP, making sure people know when they're eligible, and then really working on these benefit cliffs that make that sometimes a loop that folks end up in where they can't look at jobs that might pay more because they'll lose their eligibility. So lots of different ways, that's a technology that more and more locations are putting in place.
Okay, I love that. Let's talk about solutions. Let's talk, okay, Flashfood, Flashfood, but you did that on purpose, the naming of it, right?
Yeah,
So,
I
yes.
wanted to get Flash Flood as it's perfect. Much more news clips that way.
Exactly. That's why we're called We Don't Have Time. It shows up all the time.
Yeah, I know,
Yeah.
it's amazing.
So how does Flashfood fit into the ecosystem of solutions?
Well, she just mentioned it, but SNAP, whenever we added that payment methodology, it opened up an entire new opportunity for individuals. I mean, I'd spent 20 years running grocery stores, right, and companies that did that. And donation is very important. Markdown is very important. Order optimization is very important. There's just way too much that's over-ordered because, candidly, all of you expect grocery stores to be perfect all the time. And your expectations are creating waste and creating the problems that all of us are now trying to solve. And I'm saying you, I know you're trying to solve it too, but I mean, it's the truth. When you go to Europe, you don't see stores that are jam-packed with lots of product. You don't have to have tables that are full of every perfect orange ever. You have just what is needed for that day. Mm-hmm. And so what we're trying to do is to get the tail end of those things, those items that are maybe too small or too couldn't be donated or whatever else, and solve for that. And what is interesting, I was listening to Brandon, produce is our #1 item that's on there. And it's this mixed thing of just one apple here, one pear there, one pepper there, that maybe wasn't going to be used for anything else. Maybe it has a divot in it, but it's the #1 item. And I love when I go on TikTok and see what these home chefs are doing with these items. I mean, they're creating things that are feeding their families, creating inspirational. I mean, it's fun. Like, there is a fun element to this as well. And so I appreciate that everybody up here is also doing social media, because it is important to engage your shoppers, your stakeholders, into everything that's going on with it.
And are you finding that this is for Julia, but just to transition, that there are certain demographics that are more amenable than others? And I'm leading to say that it's easier for the next generation to kind of get on board with this. No?
But you're wrong.
Oh.
And so that's what's so interesting in this. I thought that too, but the data has shown something very, very different. Boomers are very, very involved in this, very involved. If I look at the demography of our shoppers and where there's the most action right now, it really surprised me when I started to look at cohorts and who's more engaged inside of this. And by the way, they're on TikTok as well. So it's not just I'm Gen X, I'm the forgotten generation, but millennials and others, it's not just you too, Brandon? Listen, we're actually good people. Gen X needs to be talked about at some point. It's out there. But it's amazing how it cuts across age, and it's amazing how it cuts across income. There are a lot of people engaged on this, actually.
Okay. So would you agree with that, Julia?
Absolutely. I think the multi-generational work is like what it's all about. Farmlink just happened to be started by college students, but we are now 4 years in and have many industry professionals that have been in the industry for 40 plus years that joined us, and we're a very diverse group across all generations, absolutely. And we need them, and they need us for different reasons. First person that comes to mind is our head of farmer advocacy, Mike Meyer. I would say he's north of 60. And gosh, we could not have evolved like we have in the last year without his support and his knowledge and his community that he's built on trust over the last 40 years. And that's truly at the forefront of our ability to move hundreds of millions of pounds over the next couple of years is truly because we have included people from all different generations. So it's absolutely integral to the success of this work.
Nice. There's still room for all of us. Amazing. So I do actually have a question for you. So how do we get the next generation excited about farming, right? And not just about farming, excited about all of the new advances in farming, because there's this dearth of interest in joining agriculture, from my understanding, as somebody not immediately working in this field. And so you're very much at the forefront of this. How do you get the next generation excited about agriculture?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, first I'll say I agree with everything everybody's been saying. I mean, it's a really interesting point you brought up, where it's like, if there's the last kale sitting on the shelf, would any of you buy it? Like, nobody buys it.
It's crazy.
And it's fine. And it's fine. Well, I know Alice buys it.
This is not
We want to be like you.
That was a stupid question with Alice in the audience. But the rest of you, shame on you. Tools are super important. Just really quickly, and then I'll get to that, I promise. Is like, you're absolutely right. Like running grocery stores, like inventory management, computer-assisted ordering, like managing all of that is so critical. And then, working with farmers too. I mean, because we talk about affordability, input costs are going up, labor's going up. And we all know there's a challenge in labor and fair wages, et cetera, but labor costs are going up. Water costs are going to be going up in California. And so how do farmers, change some of the technologies they're using to reduce their input costs, make it more efficient, et cetera? That's a big challenge, requires a big investment. And we all know the challenges there around subsidies and then borrowing and some predatory lending and all sorts of things that happen in that space. To get to your point, you're right. There's a mass retirement of farmers. Everybody's around the age of the person you mentioned on your team, 60-something, and the next generation just hasn't developed as much of an interest in carrying that on. You see some of that legacy growing. You see some of that legacy carrying on, usually on local farms, or people transitioning back after going off and doing something else, studying something and coming back and wanting to work on the farm, but it's not happening enough. And it's certainly not happening enough with diverse farmers. So there needs to be a lot of investment and support from organizations like us up here, like businesses like Sprouts, building scholarship programs, building training programs, investing in the nonprofits and other partnerships that are educating farmers on this, connecting people back to their food. We have this massive disconnection from our normal day lives and where our food comes from and the soil, et cetera. And so we need to really work on bridging that gap. And we do it through a lot of ways, some of the ways I alluded to in terms of scholarships, in terms of investing in school programs that are building the next generation of farmers. We do a lot of that work through our foundation. And we try to find local farmers that are family farms, and we try to support them and buy all their crop to support the local communities. So there's multiple ways to do that, but it's a big problem, and it needs to be addressed really quickly, because if we don't have people growing our food, it's over.
We need Taylor Swift to basically be like, the coolest thing to do is be a farmer.
Coolest thing to do is be a farmer, not an influencer.
Or a combination of both.
Or a farming influencer.
Farming
There you go.
influencer. We
I'm
solved
just,
it.
remember, I'm Gen X, so all I do is dump on influencers all day long. So.
So we have a few minutes left. I wish this panel was longer, honestly. I think all of you do too. I'm going to turn it over to Erica, and then if you all have your kind of final thoughts to say quickly, I'll try and get to everybody. But Erica, we're communicating right now. We know how important communication is, and how is technology aiding in this communication? Advocacy is ultimately going to be what solves a lot of the issues that have been raised on this stage today. So talk to us about the importance of that.
Right. Well, it's really a connector, and I mentioned that you can't food bank your way out of hunger. That's something we say all the time at Feeding America. So building a bigger tent. Now, how are we advocating for universal free school meals across this country? How are we bringing in partners in housing, in healthcare, in utility assistance? Oftentimes, folks come into the Feeding America network through our community organizations needing help, and the connector for me is working really hard to build technology solutions so that we can refer and connect them to others in this big tent through these partnerships, so we can really address the root causes of hunger themselves.
Nice. I'm going to go to Nick, then Brandon, and Julia will get the last word. Go ahead.
Yeah, I would go back to collective impact. We have one of the nutritionists from Stop and Shop that's here in the audience, and she does events where she brings all the different services together, teaches people how to do that. And I think oftentimes we look for these big, massive macro changes instead of going one family at a time. And that's what I love about the nutritionist that's working on this. That's what I love about what we're all doing as well. That does have a viral impact though, right? Like once you hear about those things, like social media can be a very powerful like exclamation mark and get it to more folks.
Sure. Brendan.
Closing remarks?
Yep.
Well, I mean, like, I'm sure a lot of folks in this room are privileged. So you have, you can have your food delivered, you can shop at your Whole Foods in, Lower Manhattan or whatever. So, for you, it's easy to do your research and say, oh, I want to spend my dollar, at this company that does well and sources sustainably, et cetera. Not everybody has that ability. So, I just think we all just need to work a heck of a lot harder and care a heck of a lot more. In our space, I'm talking about people in my space, in my shoes, to try to change the system from what we can control so that we can deliver more for the people that are outside this room, frankly, and the people that need it.
Nice. Julia.
I think ask yourself, how can I include more people in this solution? FarmLink's grown solely because we've just said yes to working with as many people as possible, as fast as possible. And I think radically asking questions and learning as fast as you can along the way has been the key to our ability to make more of an impact and to invest in youth, to be participating in these things. I'm so grateful that this is what I did right out of college, and there's so many students and people that are trying to change their careers midlife changes as well that I think are to be celebrated. And I'll just say the last word on climate. This is absolutely worth fighting for. It's the only thing worth fighting for. And we have the resources available to us. We don't need to reinvent wheels and all these crazy technologies. We really just need to look at the basics and start listening and including more people. So I'm so grateful to be on this panel to talk.
I mean, this is what's happening right out of college. I think we have a lot to look forward to. This is amazing. Thank you, Julia. Thank you for those remarks. Please join me in thanking all of the panelists, Erica, Nick, Brandon, Julia. Okay, I want some credit for staying on time. Everyone, please exit this way.
Give that a panel a round of applause. Sorry, a little late. A little lag back there. They were great. So many good things said on that panel, but I just have to say that little bit of attention that was paid to Gen X, I feel seen. So thanks for that. So in this next conversation, we get to talk about food as medicine, which has come up several times this week in different conversations. So I'm so excited to welcome Dariush Mazafarian, who's a cardiologist, the director of the Food as Medicine Institute at the Friedman School of Nutrition Science and Policy at Tufts University. Please give him a round of applause. And Marian Nessler, who is an author, nutritionist, I'm losing my words, and professor of food studies and public health emerita at New York University. Please give her a round of applause. Neither of these people needed an introduction, but I'm so glad to have you both on stage. Happy Climate Week. Nice to have you both here.
Thank you.
So I want to talk about food as medicine because I think, and maybe I'm wrong, I think you both think about it a little bit differently. So I would love, Dari, for you to explain your sort of approach to food as medicine.
Yeah, well, I think the term food as medicine can mean a lot of different things. It can mean the Hippocrates notion that food is fundamental to health. We all kind of know that. It can mean actually taking food as medicine and identifying the thousands and thousands and thousands of molecules and understanding what they do and their biologic effects and putting them in a pill. But the third meaning is, I think, what we're focusing on right now, which is how to integrate food-based treatments and therapies into healthcare so that you go to the doctor screens you for your nutritional needs, screens you for your diseases, and prescribes in addition to prescribing a drug or a device or a surgery or a diagnostic test, actually prescribes food, a meal, a medically tailored grocery package, something else. And as part of your therapeutic plan provides that to you along with nutrition and culinary counseling from a team to actually treat disease, to treat your disease and manage and reduce risk. But this isn't, we're not talking about 10 years prevention and starting with kids, and all those things are important too, but we're talking about treating diabetes, heart failure, women with high-risk pregnancy, HIV, cancers. Yeah. And what's exciting is this is actually really happening now. Billions of dollars a year right now are going through healthcare into healthy food. And so it's a really exciting movement. There's a lot of questions about how it's going to work and what it means, and happy to talk more about these things. And I'll just end by saying, this isn't, the term is not food is only medicine. So food is also culture and health and well-being and and poison and many other things. But one thing it is it can be used as medicine.
So much joy in food too.
Yes,
so
joy.
yeah, thank you, Dari. Marianne, I'd love to hear how you think about food as medicine.
I think of food as pleasure. It's one of life's greatest pleasures. And I think the food as medicine concept is terrific in theory, but I don't know what your experience is. When I go to see my primary care doctor, I'm lucky if I get 15 minutes. And that doctor does not have the time, the inclination, the understanding to even ask me, about nutrition or find out what I eat or do any of the other things, starting, as Karen Washington so eloquently put it, with asking people what they want. You want to change somebody's diet, you've got to start from where they are. I just don't understand how it works in practice. What I find fascinating about it is the billions of dollars that are going into it. And as I heard somebody say once, food as medicine is a concept that plays well with Congress. So there's tons of funding with it. Somehow Congress has the idea that this is something that'll work and the money is going into it. I hope the money is being spent well.
Yeah.
And that you're getting tons of it.
We're not, but
Not
that'd
yet.
be nice. That'd
Not
be
yet.
nice, yeah.
Sorry, can you respond to that? Because right now, I think most medical schools in this country, the doctors that Marion has seen, I have a very different experience. I see a nurse practitioner. She asks me what I eat. We talk about it all the time. But, most medical students are only getting about 1 hour throughout of nutrition education throughout their whole medical school sort of lifetime. And, how can we change that so that doctors are talking to Marion and lots of other folks?
Yeah, so this is not at scale, first of all. And so, to get to scale, you need to have the trained practitioner, you need to have the vendor, you need to have the billing and reimbursement and screening, and that all needs to be built. It's right now, patchwork. It's happening really well in some places and not at all in most places. But, to respond to concern that it might not work, the great thing is all the evidence so far shows that it works. When you actually, and let me step back and say, while not exclusively, the majority of these programs are targeting people with social needs, targeting people with food insecurity, low income, housing challenges, transportation challenges. And so it's actually targeting, I don't know who's in the room, but probably mostly not people in this room. People who are really having ramen or having, they go to the grocery store and they buy dollars per calorie. Like they actually make those calculations, right? That of how many calories can I get per my dollar? And so giving people who are in incredible challenged circumstances, giving them fruits and vegetables and legumes and beans and nuts and seeds and yogurt. I mean, I had a woman who said it was like Christmas every week. I got this medically tailored grocery box, and I never bought these things myself because if I didn't like them or I wasted them, it would be money down the drain. But since this is being paid for me now, I can experiment and try new things. And so the evidence shows so far that this works. It lowers hemoglobin A1C, lowers blood pressure, lowers body mass index, improves financial strain, improves mental health. And we're building the plane while we're flying it.
Yeah.
So this isn't even the ultimate, perfectly efficient system yet. This is on the way to efficiency. So I think it's a really exciting time, and it's early days. We need to build this and make it work. But I'm so excited that there's an innovation in healthcare, a systems-based innovation in healthcare that's actually targeting food, the most fundamental thing for health, and it's actually targeting people who need it the most.
Yeah.
Because as a cardiologist, I've seen statins, I've seen other lipid-lowering drugs, I've seen vascular devices and diagnostic tests and all these things. They always go to the people who need them the most, the least. And here we have the first major innovation in healthcare that's actually going to people who need it the most. And so I think it's an exciting time. And we have to remember, we talk about money and the power of money. $1 in $5 in our economy, $1 in $5 that goes through our pockets goes to healthcare. $1 in $5. The average family of four, it's almost $50,000 a year for an average family of four to spend in healthcare. If we can take a little bit of that money and start applying it to healthy food, we'll not only get better health, we'll start to have farmers who are getting rewarded for growing these foods. We'll have companies starting to get rewarded for shipping these foods and storing these foods and making these foods. So it's not the only solution, but we're actually taking the biggest sector of our economy, which is healthcare, and shifting it to focus on food.
Since Marion brought up Congress, I'm hoping you can both talk about policy and
That was
maybe
my next comment. I want policy.
right.
I want policy. We had policy during the pandemic.
Right.
People had more money during the pandemic to spend on food. Guess what? Food insecurity went down. What a surprise. If you give people food and they eat it, of course they're going to be healthier. If you give them money to buy food, a lot of them are going to buy healthy food. We need policy. We had it. Congress took it away.
And why don't we have more policies, Dari, that focus on, we tell people, like, eat better. We shame them when they have these diet-related diseases. We do all of the wrong things in a lot of ways, and I know you are working so hard to shift that, but then we don't have these policies in place to really make sure that people can eat in a way that is better for them and for the planet.
Yeah, so we think of food as medicine as a pyramid with the most intensive sort of fully prepared meals at the top, down to groceries, down to produce, down to strengthening our federal nutrition programs like SNAP and WIC and school meals. And at the bottom, at the base of food as medicine, is population level policy that actually supports a healthier food system for all. That's the prevention.
Yeah.
That's the addressing and targeting the whole population. So food as medicine absolutely includes kind of the policy as a whole. I think that it's incredibly important to make sure that those policies are something that we can focus on and pass through Congress,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of controversy about those things.
Really?
And a lot of challenges. But what's interesting is the GLP-1 drug movement. They're so expensive. These drugs are so expensive that now folks in Congress, folks in healthcare are starting to say, we can't spend $600 billion on a single drug.
Right.
It's already, last year, semaglutide is already the top-selling drug in the United States, and it's going to go up. So it's actually starting to turn attention on policy. And so
Yeah.
I agree with Marion. We need effective policy to support, food as medicine. Food as medicine in healthcare is one tool, but there's a lot of stuff we can do, in the policy realm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Marion, I know you have some thoughts on GLP-1s that we discussed earlier this week.
It's the most interesting thing in the world to talk about. I love it because it's an existential threat to the food system in general. Because one of the effects of it apparently is people don't want to eat junk food. They don't want to eat ultra-processed foods. They don't want snack foods. They don't want sugar-sweetened beverages. They don't want candy. They don't want desserts. And they want smaller portions. What a concept. And the food industry is quaking in its collective boots between that and and inflation, which has increased the price of foods. They're just really worried. And the concept of ultra-processed foods in general, which everybody gets, and everybody understands that you'd be healthier if you ate fewer ultra-processed foods. So this is a fascinating time. It's also a fascinating time to find out what happens with these drugs, whether people will stay on them or not, because about half the people who are on them go off them in a year because of the cost or because of the side effects. So I'm just waiting to see what happens. I'm fascinated by it.
Can I add something,
Please,
Danny?
please.
You also asked about the focus on the individual versus policy, and I should have mentioned, 3 in 4 American adults today have obesity. 1 in 2 have diabetes or pre-diabetes, and if you add blood cholesterol levels and blood pressure levels to those two things, 7% of American adults actually have healthy levels of all of those things. 7%. So 93% of Americans are walking around sick, and most of them, it's their baseline. They don't even know they're sick because this is how they've always felt, right? And it affects their physical health, their mental health. When you have 93% of the population who's sick, the system is broken.
Yeah.
This is not a problem of individual free will and gluttony and poor choice and you bad person. You should have made a better decision. The system is broken, and so broken systems need systems change. And so I think that's that's where, food as medicine is a systems change, a policy change within healthcare. There's things we can do around at FDA, there's things we can do at NIH, there's things we can do in the federal nutrition programs. Those are the major levers right now to start shifting, U.S. food policy. And I think there's a moment here, because we can't afford these drugs. Even at the most discounted amount, which they're about $550 a month, which is way more than any person spends on food, unless they're going to fancy New York restaurants every night. But in the grocery store, you're not going to spend $550 on one person. And so right now, 93 million Americans qualify for just the weight loss indication. There's a diabetes indication, there's a cardiovascular disease indication, there's a kidney indication. Just the 93 million Americans who qualify for the weight loss indication, if they all got the drug at discounted prices, it would cost $600 billion a year. Guess how much we spend on all drugs combined in the United States right now? $600 billion a year. So we're talking about one drug costing as much as every other prescription drug that we buy. It's impossible. We can't do it. We can't do it. Like our economy cannot handle it. So something's got to give, and I think what's going to give is people are going to start looking for cheaper alternatives to fix people's health, and food and exercise and sleep and mental health are the most foundational things.
Yeah. I mean, the common sense things, and not these weird drugs. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, they're good drugs, but we just can't afford them.
No, they're so expensive.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about how the federal dietary guidelines fit into all of what we're talking about, because they become so contentious, and I understand why, as somebody who looks at the food system a lot, but they shouldn't be as contentious as they are. And I wonder if you can both talk about them.
Well, I'll start. I just think dietary advice is so simple, and I'm very fond of quoting Michael Pollan, eat food, not too much, mostly plants. Really that takes care of it. And the great thing about it is that takes care of diet and health, and it also takes care of diet and climate change, because it's the same diet, largely but not exclusively plant-based, not eating too much ultra-processed foods, and balancing calories. Really simple. What I find just breathtaking about the dietary guidelines is how the politics of them are so complicated this year. We just saw Republicans at a congressional hearing talking about the need to prevent chronic disease in a way that mainstream nutrition scientists aren't talking about, except you. And and I'm just stunned by the fight over the dietary guidelines, who's on which side, and how people are making political choices about it. I'm just so glad I'm not on that committee this time. I was on the committee in 1995. That was enough. And those were the good old days.
What are your thoughts, Dari?
So I think for everyone to first be clear, there's two separate processes. There's the scientists who are volunteers and spend about 40% of their time for 2 years for free to do this work, and it's unbelievable. It takes away from their career and their success and their research, all these faculty, and everything they do is public. Everything they do is documented. They can't send emails or have phone calls without it being documented, and then they come up with a scientific report. And then that report goes to USDA and HHS, and it's a black box, and we have no idea who they're talking to. We have no idea how they make their decisions, and the final dietary guidelines come out. And to sum up the process very simply, oversimplified, anything that the scientific committee says is good for you, eat more, that gets into the dietary guidelines. Eat more fruits, eat more vegetables, and so on. Anything the dietary guidelines say eat less gets transfigured and transmorphed into nutrients. So they say one of the dietary guidelines actually said, you can have sugar as long as it's not 10% of your calories. You can have salt as long as so for example, you can have a soda and you can have processed meat as long as it's within your, rather than saying, these are foods that are bad for you, avoid them. Like the dietary guidelines never say that. So that's the political process. People get really hung up in the committee, but the committee's usually excellent. It's really the political process. The second challenge, I think, with the dietary guidelines is the bar for evidence for scientists, this group of really great scientists like Marion, who was on this, who really look at the data. The bar for them to make a decision, they have to have convincing evidence, or at least moderate evidence, to make a decision and change things and say, do this or don't do this. The bar for food companies to put whatever they want in the
Yeah.
food supply is anything they want. And so we've got a complete imbalance of the threshold of data. Companies can put anything they want in food, call it GRAS, generally regarded as safe, by themselves.
Yeah.
They don't even have to let FDA know. Since 1990, this has been FDA policy. There's thousands and thousands and thousands of chemicals in foods that no one even knows about
Yeah.
other than the companies. And they can process foods in different ways, they can adjust them in different ways, do all these things, and there's no really effectively in the United States, no real bar for safety.
I want
And
to
yet-
say something about
and
the
yet for the
dietary
dietary
guidelines
guidelines to say you can't do that or take this out, they have to have this incredible bar.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
a completely uneven playing field.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
really
I think
complex.
it's really important to understand how much the process has changed. Because when I was on the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee hundreds of years ago in 1995, we did the research. We set the research questions. We did the research. We wrote the research report, and we wrote the dietary guidelines. Over time, the guidelines have gotten increasingly politicized and have been taken over by the agencies. And we have an election between now and the 2025 dietary guidelines. And so very much how they come out is going to depend on who gets elected.
Let's talk about that, the politicalization of the food system. I'd love for you both to sort of, is there a way out of that? And you're, I was with
Election
you.
campaign laws.
Well, I was with Dari a few weeks ago. Yes, please. On Capitol Hill. Are we making progress?
Yeah, I have just been stunned by the change and receptivity in Congress to the notion that food is the top cause of poor health in this country and it's fixable. And while it's totally bipartisan, more Republicans than Democrats are actually recognizing this than before because they see the fiscal
Right,
impact. When I
right.
was born in 1969, 5% of the federal budget was spent on healthcare. Now it's almost a third. It is crowding out every other spending priority. So Congress is arguing about infrastructure or the child tax credit or NIH funding or all of all these other things. Those are drops in the bucket compared to healthcare spending. Healthcare spending is dominating the
Yeah.
federal budget and going up.
Yep.
And so Republicans especially see this, and I've told them none of you, Democrats or Republicans, are going to be able to enact anything you want until you fix healthcare spending, and you're never going to fix healthcare spending by rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic through, we'll create HMOs, or we'll create Medicare Advantage, or we'll do this or that to have doctors do less. You have to fix people's health.
Yeah.
We're deeply unhealthy, and most of that happens outside of the clinic, outside of the hospital. It happens in our daily lives. And food is the top issue, and then of course the other foundational issues we mentioned. And so what's really exciting is both parties now see this. And so Vern Buchanan, who chairs the Ways and Means Committee subcommittee that funds healthcare, held this hearing on last week, and Senator Bill Frist, a former Republican Senate Majority Leader and physician, Dr. Mark Harmon, a functional medicine doctor, and others spoke about this, and Republicans and Democrats in their opening remarks said the food system's broken, we have to fix this. And so there's a moment here.
Yeah.
There's a moment here where both parties are recognizing this. Now, how that turns into action, I think, remains to be seen. And I'm feeling very much motivated to take everything that we can do to make that turn into action. But I think everyone here in the room, call your representatives, senators and House representatives, say the food system is broken. I've heard about these movements. I want better food policy. It's remarkable. They get 10 calls, and they're like, wow, this is important to our constituents.
Sure.
So I think we have a collective power to start to shift things, since both parties care about this now. As Marian said, Republicans are holding these hearings, Democrats are holding these hearings. It's no longer a partisan issue.
Yeah, that's exciting. But Marian, do you feel hopeful about the change that could happen because of this bipartisan support?
I think everything depends on the election. Get out and vote. It's really important to do that because it depends completely on who's holding power. Unless we can unless we can get people to run for office who care about public health and environmental health, we're not going to get any change. Unless they're forced to by the finances. I mean, the healthcare system is dysfunctional. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Well, if you're sick, you want to be in the United States, right? Like, this is the best healthcare to take out an acute emergency in the world. But if you want to have a healthcare system that treats population health and is equitable and is cost effective, it's broken. So it's the best in the world and it's the worst in the world at the same time.
It's really bad, and it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So we need lots of fixes, and the way to fix them is through politics and policy. And the way to fix politics and policy is by electing people who are going to do good things and who care about these issues.
I feel like, I've said this when I've had groups of farmers on stage this week. I would love for more farmers to run for office. I'd also love more doctors and more nutritionists to run for office, because then you'd have people sort of embedded within, right, who care about these issues.
Can
Go ahead.
I throw in a comment about farmers? In the last panel, I was concerned that there was a discussion about how nobody wanted to go into farming. That's not my experience at all. Lots of people want to go into farming. They just don't have the land, and they don't have the resources,
Absolutely.
and they don't have the money, and they need to be able to make a living, and that's policy issue.
Yeah, there's so many barriers, yes, to access. As dean of the Friedman School, you saw that. You saw people who wanted to be chefs, farmers, nutritionists, doctors. You saw the young people who wanted to farm, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a program at Tufts called the New Entry Sustainable Farming Program, and it was called New Entry because it was originally set up about 30 years ago for immigrants who had come into this country, and they knew how to farm, but they didn't know how to get land, they didn't know how to deal with capital, they didn't know how to do banks, and so it was a training program to help them understand business plans, use GPS to identify plots of land, help them understand also regenerative agriculture practices and all these things. After a few years, about 15 years ago, the program was overwhelmingly actually Americans. Americans, usually mid-career, 30s, 40s, 50s, who wanted to switch and go into farming. And that program has now trained over 2,000 farmers. And so there is interest, but yet, I think 90% of farmers in the United States are over age 55. And so, not enough people, young people are going into this field.
They want to, they can't.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I want to give you both in these last 30 seconds, and I know what Marion's is, I think, but a call to action. This is the end of Climate Week. This is the end of Climate Week. I want to, maybe it's not a call to action, maybe it's something to inspire and give everyone hope as they sort of go back to their regular lives and are not at Climate Week anymore.
I don't know. I mean, just look around the audience, look at each other. How could you not have hope? There you are.
It is hopeful.
Really?
Good one, Marion. Good one. Jari, last
Did you
word.
know I was going to say that?
No.
So I would say the exciting hope is we're actually on the cusp of an incredible explosion of nutrition science compared to the methods that were developed in the 80s and 90s. Nutrition science is really, really young. The first vitamin isolated and discovered and synthesized was 1932. Wow. Less than 100 years ago. Vitamins weren't even known until the 1920s and 1930s. And the science of chronic disease, nutrition and diabetes and cardiovascular disease and cancer really started around 1980. So we're just 40 years into this. And so I'm really excited about the science, about understanding food as biologic information, what it does to your microbiome, to your brain, to your cells. And so with the right investment, we need a nutrition science moonshot in this country. With the right investment, we could discover unbelievably interesting and exciting things in the next decade.
Oh, that is hopeful too. Thanks to both of you. Give them a round of applause. Thank you both so much. I really enjoyed that. If you want to exit that way, it's easier. Thank you both. Give them a round of applause as they exit. So in this next conversation, we're going to talk about making nutrition food choices, and again, food is medicine. So we'll have Kat Morgan, the program assistant at the Rockefeller Foundation. Give Kat a round of applause. Jenny Du, the co-founder and SVP of operations at Apeel. Nice to see you, Jenny. Nishant Roy, the chief impact officer at Chobani. And I'm not sure if Chef Priyanka is here, but Chef Priyanka Naik is an NYC-based, thank you, and I've totally messed up her name, is an NYC-based sustainable chef and Food Network champion. Give her a round of applause. Glad to see you. I'm excited to talk to all of you. Thanks for being here. Kat, those earrings are everything. Everything. Thank you. And I want to start with you because you were recently talking with me and others on this panel about the right to health. And can you explain how that, the human right to health connects to the conversations around climate that we've been having?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, of course, health is a human right. Food is also a human right. But in the United States, we don't have any sort of legally codified right to health. We have a legal right to health care, but not to health and well-being in and of its own. And so it's really interesting as there are implications of this all throughout the health system. When you think about concentrated animal feeding operations in environmental justice communities who have respiratory infections because they're inhaling ammonia.
Right.
But you can also think about it from the aspect of food labeling and warning labels on foods. So, for example, in countries throughout South America and also in the EU, there's really a cool new policy lever called front of package nutrition labeling. And it's really exciting for a lot of reasons, but one of which is because it's been shown to reduce childhood obesity, which is really great. And so the idea is you put warning labels on the front of highly processed foods, and these warning labels are supposed to educate consumers very quickly at a glance. So, for example, in Mexico, if you go to buy a box of Frosted Flakes, there will be 3 octagons, black octagons on it, and it'll say high in sugar, and other products could be high in sodium, high in salt. And so what's so great about front of package nutrition labeling, and the reason it's been successful in other countries, is because they have a legally codified right to health, something that we don't have in the United States. But it's still really exciting because there are a lot of NGOs and think tanks and activists who are doing really good policy work, working with senators like Cory Booker, to try to push front of package nutrition labeling into law. And so it's one of those things where health is a human right, but we don't always protect it in the legal system, and it really requires a lot of creativity and cross-sector collaboration to push those things into law.
That's absolutely true, and that's why I'm glad we have this panel, because you're all working in different aspects of this. And Chef, you're seeing so much energy around food as medicine, but I want to take a step back because there's one thing that bothers me about food as medicine, the term, because cultures around the world, indigenous cultures, traditional cultures, have been using food as medicine for centuries, for millennia. Are we taking something away from those cultures when we sort of put food as medicine in this little box here in the United States that we put it in?
Yeah, I think the one good thing that's coming out of kind of everything that's going on in terms of just recognizing the importance of nutrition and minimizing waste and using food as medicine is looking back to a lot of these ancient cultures that have been doing this for hundreds, if not centuries. I'm Indian, I'm first generation, so our food and kind of our thinking around health and medicine really stems from Ayurveda, which is using natural foods and spices and herbs as and using their healing properties as natural medications. And so when we were little, we would always be annoyed if our mom or our grandma was like, drink this or do this, it'll help in this way. And some people always are like, oh, these are old wives' tale. But there is some truth to actually consuming certain natural herbs and spices that will be good for you, like using ginger to reduce inflammation. Turmeric has anti-cancer fighting properties. And I think incorporating a lot of these natural foods into your day-to-day can be extremely helpful. And I'm not a trained nutritionist or a specialized, I don't specialize in Ayurveda, but I certainly know more about it just given my culture. But I do appreciate the fact that it is being embraced more. And I think food should actually be looked at as something that is preventative. So a lot of, and we talked about this a little bit, I know, is that the healthcare in America, which is a whole other panel and subject and conversation, but a lot of it isn't necessarily preventative. And I think we as individuals can look to food and what's available to us to help maybe treat ourselves in a more preventative kind of using food as medicine manner rather than, oh, something broke, let me fix it now.
Thank you. It's important to center it in that way. So thank you for doing that. Nishant, Kat talked about the right to health, the right to food. Is there a right or a responsibility, let me put it this way, for businesses to really invest in those kinds of endeavors, these rights, these inalienable rights that we should all have as humans?
Yeah, I mean, we at our core as a business, we've always felt that access to nutritious food is a human right. And we do it in the way we practice our business. You know, you look at the food that we make, it's got to follow a very simple acronym for us. It's got to be DNNA. It's got to be first and foremost delicious. Otherwise, you'll never pick up our products. Right. It's got to be nutritious. It's got to be natural. And it's got to be accessible. And accessible not just in where you find it in the store, but also accessible from a price point perspective.
Yeah.
And I know when Hamdi had founded the business, if you looked at the yogurt category then, which was in 2005, the average amount of sugar inside the yogurt category was around 43 grams of sugar. And if you look at, that's like 13 sugar cubes if you just wanted a visual of that. And then if you look at the yogurt category today, the average amount of sugar in the category today is 15 grams. So dramatic decrease.
Go Chobani.
Go Chobani. I mean, the amount of market share that the business was able to gain over time forced a lot of the competitors to reformulate their products, which has led to, you know, more nutrient-dense products along the way. So I think business has this responsibility, and it can use its power and innovation and resources to really change categories. And Chobani, if you think about it, was just such a small actor where you have General Mills and Dannon and some of the other bigger folks that are out there that have like much bigger, deeper pockets. So to go against the big folks is a way you can go and tackle it.
Yeah, I want to talk to you for just a second, maybe a minute, about your personal history, because like my board member Julie Cunin at Oatly, you have a very different background. Like business, going to Chobani was not like the first thing that you did.
Yes. I have a very eclectic background. I actually started my professional career in the United States Air Force, and I deployed to Afghanistan and Iraq. Leave from there to...
Thanks for your service.
My true honor to go do it. I left there to go work for former President Clinton, and then left all of that to go join Goldman Sachs. And left Goldman Sachs to go work at the USDA, and then quickly my boss, who now runs the Rockefeller Foundation, ended up going to run USAID, and that's where I met Julie. And we worked a great deal on food systems and wanting to go and address food insecurity across the entire world. And we led this initiative called Feed the Future.
Thank you for that.
Gave me a really good insight as to some of the systemic issues that exist in food systems across the world.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your story. I love it. It's very it's all over the place, but then it all comes together too. It's amazing.
Literally, with all of what Hamdi focuses on, which is wanting to deliver good food, better food for more people, and his big focus on wanting to go and hire more refugees into the supply chain. I didn't realize I was basically all of my life experiences that culminated into like one place.
Exactly. Thank you for all of that. Jenny, Nishant talked about this, that we need to make food more accessible, obviously, and accessibility to healthy foods is paramount. You mentioned that we also have to think about the perishability of these really healthy food choices, and Apeel is trying to solve that problem of you want people to eat these fresh, healthy foods, but you don't want them to go to waste because you don't get to them in time.
Absolutely. Yeah, when we got started, first of all, this is like my first job out of school, so I'm sort of like, oh my gosh, I've got more to see. But it started off with the food waste problem and just becoming aware of that and thinking like, that's totally crazy. Like, why would we almost like so intensively extract from the earth only to throw so much of it away, and especially this really healthy fresh fruits and vegetables. So that's where we were first inspired, and then as soon as we started just getting more into food and ag, saw how being able to give more time to fresh produce that's just inherently seasonal and perishable could have so many other ripple effects. And so you kind of heard on the last panel just around diet-related disease, and it's only like 1 in 10 of us eat enough of our daily servings of fresh fruits and vegetables. Just to kind of put that into perspective. Yeah. And so how do you actually make, we've talked about produce or product that's delicious for folks to actually want to enjoy. How can you have folks feel like they can bring it home, and maybe because it's viewed as more expensive, but is it really then going to last? And do those kinds of questions create barriers to whether or not folks then would want to actually consume this wonderful product that would actually be so much more additive from like a health and benefit perspective?
Right.
We also have a challenge with regards to almost like the diversity of fresh produce varieties that are available. Often what you can get in your major grocery stores it's because it's got shelf life. So the uniformity of the varietals that are available versus what is really actually like out there for different kinds of, not just fresh fruits and vegetables, but really all plants. And so I think for us, that ability to say, like, I don't want necessarily, let's say, tomatoes that are harvested super green, didn't have the chance to develop their full profile on the vine, but it's because it's firm enough that it can actually ship and then change color and ripen along the way. And that's so different from being able to have had something fully mature and develop these different categories that don't have always that shelf life bred into them in some way, shape, or form, be actually, available and accessible and enjoyed by so many more people.
Yeah.
So for us, it started off as a food waste question, but it was almost like, what happens when you just give more time to fresh produce, and what are the potential impacts of that, and doing that in a way that uses plant-based materials and foods that are in what we already eat. You want the materials the latest and greatest in your phones, but that's maybe not what you want on your food. So then, the approach to that has been really important to us as well.
Thank you for explaining all that. I want to stay on the perishable side of this for a minute, because when people, we heard from Feeding America earlier today, and Feeding America is so great, at distributing food to those in need. In many places, though, there's not refrigeration available, and folks can't have access to these healthy, delicious foods because of that. But if they did, it provides so much more dignity, and I'm hoping you can both talk about that dignity of choice, that dignity of these are foods that I like, they're culturally appropriate to me, I want to eat more of them because I know they're good for me.
Yeah, I know for us, a couple of things. One is Chobani, what are we best known for? We're best known for our yogurt, but then we've also expanded into making creamers, and we're making protein, which is coming from dairy. So we're buying a large amount of dairy. And then we started to talk to different food banks, pantries, and they had wanted to incorporate dairy. It was actually one of the top 5 requested items in food banks and pantries across the country. And yet many lack access to refrigeration. And we said, well, we know dairy really well. How can we make a shelf-stable dairy and also make it better for you in the process? So we were able to innovate, use our resources, and we created a product which we call Chobani Super Milk. It's got 50% more protein, 25% less sugar, and it's actually got 7 grams of fiber in there. And the product is completely for free. It's going to the food banks and to the pantries and in responding to disasters across the country. So we launched this product in July, treated as if like it's a product that we were going to go sell commercially, which we're not, but it's already been deployed 3 times for natural disasters.
Wow.
And
climate related, a lot of them.
Yeah. And from a cultural sensitivity, many are accepting it throughout various different diverse communities across the country. And for the folks that are now unfortunately affected by the disasters, we've heard feedback from the American Red Cross. It's actually been really well received, because normally the good source of protein for many that are affected by disasters are protein bars.
Yeah.
And this has been far better for them and their families. Yes.
Thanks so much. Jenny, I'd love to hear from you on this sort of dignity standpoint of providing perishable food to those who, need it, want it, but can't get it.
Yeah, I think folks have talked a lot about just choice. And so how do you give folks just, again, a chance of that variety, things that are then appropriate for their families, their diets, cultural preferences. So I think, you really, touched on that so appropriately. There's no reductionist solution and a one size that fits all here. And so I think at least for us, being able to have a wide variety of these perishable products, being able to be available, is just part of that ability to give folks the choice to choose something that meets them where they are, meets their needs, versus, and also taking maybe in some ways a stigma away from some of these foods. And it's a whole other maybe topic around when we think of folks who rely on, let's say, food banking, there's a much greater diversity of folks who need to rely on that service at different times, different moments in life throughout the year. That I think being able to expand the number of options really, I think, addresses the broader demand.
Absolutely.
That's unfortunately there.
Absolutely, and hopefully that will change. Thank you for that. Chef and Kat, I want to talk about communication, and you're both communicating in different ways to different audiences. You know, the philanthropic community needs to hear these messages about health and wellness and the importance of all the things that we've been talking about and how they're related to climate change. And the folks who follow you, the millions of folks who follow you on social media, they want to hear about these things in a way that brings them together. There's a lot, we talked on the last panel about the shame and blame around diet-related diseases. And I'd love to hear from both of you how you how we can eliminate that, because it's not our fault that we are sick from the foods that we are eating. I don't know, Kat, Chef, which one?
I'll jump in. And yeah, so I think, as far as the shame and blame for diet-related diseases go, I came to philanthropy from a public health background. I have a Master of Public Health, and something that we talk about very often are upstream interventions. So an example of a downstream intervention would be, going to the doctor, being diagnosed with diabetes, getting the appropriate prescription. But one of the great things about good food, about food as medicine type movements, is that these are upstream interventions, right? So I know that in the United States, our annual healthcare bill for diet-related disease is about $1.1 trillion. And, I do think that in philanthropy and in most of the world, we really rely on metrics. We like numbers, and that's important from a valuation perspective. But I think food systems really transcend metrics and numbers. It's sociocultural. There's these deep-seated kind of intergenerational ties to what we eat, how we grow it, how we cook it. And so I think, part of, reducing the blame on individuals is making more accessibility in our food systems, access to fresh and whole foods. And I think that that'll require a lot of work with companies like Chobani, whose supply chains and value chains are really at more of the cutting edge of sustainability and have a more equity focused and really moral compass to their company. And that's sadly not always the case with big food, big ag, or really a lot of these organizations that have a lot of money and bargaining power. So that's my 2 cents, but happy to pass it to Chef.
I just want to say, get a moral compass, companies that are out there. Okay? Thank you, Chef.
I think for me, and my premise is always to show people what we can do as individuals rather than waiting around for a corporation or the healthcare system to change. But it's really about taking our power back as individuals to take care of ourselves. And it does, I think, kind of echoing what all of you guys are saying here, but it is difficult when across the country people are living in food deserts, or they don't have access to proper whole foods. And so I think my mission as a chef and someone who really cares about not only individual health but environmental health is how can we as one person make small changes to help ourselves and the environment overall. And so something I like to focus on are whole foods, dry beans, vegetables that are easily accessible to most people. And I say that very loosely because I have not traveled everywhere in the country. I have not seen firsthand, who has access to what, but I tend to stay away from, fancy fruits and vegetables that you need to go to a specialty market to get. Even with Indian dishes that I share, I know sometimes it's very hard to access certain spices. So I'm here are substitutes you can use. But I think for me, the mission is always how does this food make me feel? And then secondary, how is it affecting the environment or my local community? So I always emphasize try to shop at your local small business or supermarket or farmer's market and try to buy in season, because when you buy in season, it tends to be cheaper and more nutrient dense. And here's how you can make this, I showed recently how to take one head of cabbage. First of all, this head of cabbage was gigantic. And I got it on sale, and I was like, this was on sale. Like, here are 5 dishes I made with this head of cabbage. And I think just showing like accessible, clever ways on how you can incorporate more whole foods and spices and things like dried beans and legumes, which are fairly inexpensive, really nutrient dense, and just ways that, again, we can take our power back as individuals. And I also think like just showing hacks. Like, I am from New York City, I live in Manhattan. Simple things like, here's what I do to make it cheaper for myself and minimize waste. I'm going to take watermelon rinds and make it into a jam, or pickle it so I can preserve it. And I'm inadvertently saving myself money, eating something healthy, and then also saving this watermelon rind from ending up in the landfill. And yes, I'm one individual. I'm not going to change the world, but I think if 500,000 of my followers see that and at least 1% of those people do the same thing, we can kind of collectively make a difference. So that's kind of what I essentially preach about, but I try to make it fun and accessible, because I just think like if people feel like they're part of your community and feel like they're making a difference, then they'll be more inclined to maybe, again, take their power back as an individual.
I love it, and we're sadly out of time, but the your power back as individuals, that's the call to action from this panel. Thank you all so much. Give them a round of applause. Thank you all so much. This was wonderful. Thank you. You can exit this way if you want, if it's easier. Thank you all. So nice to see you all. Thank you. I'm now excited to turn. Do not leave. Are you leaving? Get back here, everyone. Because this next fireside chat is awesome. So moderating this conversation, we have my friend Stacey Vanek Smith, a senior story editor for Bloomberg Audio and a special correspondent for Marketplace. And joining her will be Sam Cass, an American political advisor, chef, personality of all kinds, investor, founder. What else? You wear a lot of hats, man. Nice to see you. Give them a round of applause, please. Thanks. Nice to see you. I'm gonna hug you too. Wherever you want. Yeah, that's great.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
How you guys doing? Good.
End of a big week.
I gotta say, 2 of my heroes are here in the front row. Mary Nessel and Alice Waters, who've shaped everything we think and do in this space. So if we could just acknowledge them. Two true heroes. So like, the pressure's on. It's like the student is now got to like perform in front of the teachers. All right, I'll get it together. I'm gonna focus now.
All right, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, it's big shoes to fill. Well, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, you've been in this space for a long time, in a lot of different roles, in policy, author, chef, talking head, all of it. And I'm wondering how you've seen the conversation change in the time that you've been a part of it.
That's a good question. I mean, I think the conversation has changed in an extraordinary way. I think if you sum it up more simply, it's gone from the visionaries and advocates who were just sort of saw the problem and started pounding their fists to say, hey, everybody wake up, and starting to battle with the health community, battling with a few companies kind of on the side, but trying to like make this thing a thing. So now, it's pervasive conversation on all kinds of, in every level of society. I mean, I still think we have a ton of work to do to truly mainstream these issues, and we can talk more about that. But, it is now something that's being considered on climate and environment in a way that even in the last 5 years, that's been transformational. 10 years ago at COP21, I was there trying to do a dinner on climate. Like, literally, it was not discussed at all, the intersection of food and climate, at the most important climate conference in the history of humanity. And that's definitely changing. And it's too slow. It's still a stepchild of these conversations, but it's definitely there, and I think we've made a lot of progress, but definitely have a lot more to do.
Well, this is Climate Week. This is the end of Climate Week. So why is it important to talk about food when we're talking about climate?
I'm sure people have been talking about this a lot, so I don't want to repeat what you've already heard. I mean, I think, so it's so fundamental to the conversation on climate change, it's hard to even know where to start. Number 2 driver of emissions globally, but unlike
Behind like fossil fuels?
Yeah, but behind energy, but unlike energy, where we can see a future where that curve can bend and start coming down, food and agriculture is going straight up with absolutely no bend in sight. Number 1 use of the world's fresh water, number 1 driver of deforestation. Like every time we see a tree cut down the Amazon, it is for animal agricultural production to either plant soybeans or graze cattle. And the list can go on and on. So I think we have to fundamentally lessen the impact of the food and agricultural system on the planet. So that's one. I think the second piece, and this part continues to be entirely overlooked, food is on the front lines of climate. I do this dinner called The Last Supper of all these ingredients that our kids or grandkids probably aren't going to have because of climate change. It's like coffee, wine, chocolate, shellfish, crustaceans. We lost 95% of the Georgia peach crop last year. Chocolate's doubled this year in price, and we haven't even started yet. I could go on and on and on. I won't take up our time on that because we're basically moving from a time of abundant resource, so super cheap energy, plenty of soil, plenty of water, growing food in the most stable climate that scientists can observe in the historical record, to a future that we're entering right now, of serious resource constraint. So we're out of water, soils are wildly depleted across the world, and extreme volatility. And so you have a system that was just constructed with abundant resource and stability. And now it's just not set up to produce food with this extreme volatility. And that is a really serious and quite scary, when you start looking at the numbers and the modeling, it's pretty intense about what we're going to face. And it's nice to talk about peaches and the crabs are gone, and I can tell you about all this stuff but it's like when you look at what's going to happen to rice, wheat, and 60% of calories just come from 4 crops. And so I know we talk a lot about, the visions for our perfect food system and all the things that need to happen. But we're also like on a knife's edge at all the time. We only got about 6 months of food to keep the world population alive at any given time. And, this is serious stuff. And so when you look at our ability to produce consistent amount of calories and food that's even half nourishing in a price point that most people can afford on a global basis, we have extraordinary challenges ahead. And I think the third area where it's really important, and this is the part on all the work I do trying to build new companies in this space, is unlike energy, where the best we can do is just make it be less bad, or mobility, where it can be less bad, where our cars aren't killing everybody. Food and agriculture, for me, is the only system on planet Earth that has the capacity to sequester enough carbon. It's the place to start. I know we need to get into water and biodiversity and the rest, but carbon's going to be where we need to start. In the time horizon, and this is very important, that the science says we have. It's like all the stuff you hear about, direct air capture and all the money it's getting, it's like, it's all bullshit. Like it's really important for the future. Like I think it's good that people are working on it, but the cost, like a per ton basis about what that can actually do, it's a joke. It's not even close. There's no way it's going to scale in the time horizon that's going to matter. Like, they may finally be doing it, but we're not going to be around for that. And the tools and technologies and practices that farmers have at their disposal now have the ability to sequester huge amounts of carbon right now, start really truly bending the curve, and bring a lot of income on farm that's desperately needed. You have 1 billion people around the globe farming or working in the system. It can really scale. And there's some things that I'm working on seeing that are really exciting. There's some problems, challenges, plenty of greenwashing, plenty of bunk credits out there and all this stuff. There's challenges. But there's an opportunity for food and ag to solve the most essential threat that humanity's ever faced in a way that I don't think any part of the economy can. So that part gets me really hopeful. At at the possibility, not necessarily hopeful about where we are, but definitely hopeful at the possibility.
If the conversation has changed a lot in a really important way, why haven't we seen more progress? Why aren't we seeing the same progress with it that you're talking about with like fossil fuels and carbon and things like that?
On the climate side?
Yeah.
We can also talk about the health side on that.
We can talk about the health side too.
Look, on the carbon side, like the numbers just aren't working right now. So I think the brass tacks comes down to this transition towards a fundamentally more regenerative agricultural system is going to cost a lot of money. And it's going to come with a lot of risk. Like change, particularly in agriculture, is risky.
For farmers,
For farmers,
company.
yeah, for growers. And so right now what you have is, and this is especially true in a high inflation environment, which we've been in, consumers aren't going to pay a penny more. I'm talking mainstream, like mass market here. Like here in New York and in Brooklyn, you'll have like, but wait a minute, that great brand. I'm like, yes, I love them, I eat them, but I'm talking about like most people here. They're not willing to pay a penny more for something that's like sustainable. They just aren't right now. People will say it, when you look at the data, that's not happening. And that's been less so over the last couple of years, frankly. So there's no consumer pull. The food companies, who are pretty low margin structures to begin with, are like, I'm not gonna give up any margin to invest heavy dollars in this if it's not gonna help me on shelf sell more product. The processors are sort of like, well, my customers, the food companies, aren't asking me for this, really. Like, so there's some pilot money, there's some good stuff that started to happen, but they're not really seeing an ROI on it. So all those companies are starting to question even the money that they had already put in over the last few years, because they're not seeing it actually get an impact ROI, really, or a business case ROI. The processors are like, well, they're not asking me, I'm not gonna spend any money on this. Why would I try to restructure my whole supply chain for something that nobody's asking me to do? And so you're then asked, we're back to like what we've been doing, which is saying, growers, like, be regenerative. What's wrong with you? Don't you care? And the growers are like, okay, so let me get this straight. You want me to change all my operations, which will likely actually lead to a drop in yield for the next 3-4 years, take on all the risk associated with that, which includes losing my farm, because it's not like we got a lot of cushion here, and for some yield benefit 3, 4, 5 years in the future, and for a benefit that right now the market's not really telling me that you want, we're asking to do a highly irrational thing. And so we have to figure out who's going to pay for this. And I, frankly, sadly, I don't think it's going to come from the food industry. I think it's going to have to be other parts of the economy who have created this problem, paying this part of the system to solve the problem. In the beginning, I think over time, policy can then come in and start putting much more hard policies on either carbon tax or cap and trade or some other mechanisms to start standing this marketplace up here. But in the beginning, I just think, I don't see another way. And I think farmers are acting rationally in that regard in terms of the economic decisions they have to make. And that's why it's not going anywhere. I mean, also, we have to do the hard work in shifting the cultural values of eaters to say, I care about how this product is produced, really, not just us. Like, I will say, I've been saying that I hate Climate Week. I've said it every time I've spoken. I'm not going to let my last speaking thing of the week go without this, because every year I come here, and every year, normally I curse when I say that, so I kept it clean for you guys today. Every year I come here, we all talk to this. I go to the same place, I have the same conversation with the same people, and I'm losing my mind, because we have to get to the hard questions about why it's not standing up. And we have to do the hard work of shifting that people start to buy food on this, both for health, which has definitely shifted on health, some, and for climate. And if we come back another year, just have the same conversation, like I don't know what I'm gonna do.
I've been warned. So how do we change that? What is the way to move it forward? I mean, is it you're talking about maybe changing consumer demand? That seems hard. I mean, why isn't policy the solution? You said it probably wasn't, but that seems like a very obvious one if you've got something that needs to kind of come up against company profits and things like that?
So I guess my perspective on policy, it depends. Policy is always so often talked about in such broad strokes that I find it to be like completely unhelpful. Policy has a really important role to play. But we overstate the role of policy in the solution here to our peril. And I went into the White House, I had Omnivore's Dilemma, I had food politics on my other arm, and I went running in. Food politics, very informative. Omnivore's Dilemma, very problematic. We have this narrative that it's the reason we're eating what we are is because the government subsidizes some things, doesn't subsidize something else. If only we switch those subsidies and their collusion with the big guys, everything would be fine. I'm just telling you that it could not be further from the truth. The reason we are eating what we're eating is not because of the subsidy system. The subsidy system is bad policy and could be used to incentivize much better behavior through the system, without a doubt. And I'm not here to say in any way, as the person who's in there like getting my ass kicked, trying to fight on policy that doesn't have a really important role to play on some very specific ways. But that's not what's truly determining what's on our plates. It's just not. And there's hard to imagine any kind of a couple rules that are going to change all that could ever have a shot at being law in the United States, let alone in other places. So, like on the climate side, for example, super important policy roles to play. Government has a big role to play around insurance and ensuring transition to regenerative systems. Like, there's a lot of risk. And right now, there's no insurance product for farmers to take on that risk and something goes wrong. Huge, really important policy that could move a big needle, right? Measurement and verification on on the outcomes of what's happening on farm. Super expensive, not good enough, really important. And the government actually, I think the Biden administration put like $200 or $300 million into trying to crack how do we measure soil health, soil carbon, these things. Really, really important. Rules of the road for measurement. Part of the problem in the system is like there's been a bunch of bullshit. And so there's like lack of confidence in like, just some bad credits or bad, insetting where you're saying this is actually better, grown in a better way. And so the confidence from the market where people, advocates rightly point out that was garbage. And now everybody's like, all right, well, I'm not going to do anything. So real standardization about how we measure is important. And the rules of the road of a functioning marketplace here, or how you inset it and how you account for it, really important work for the government. And they purchase a lot of food, so they could help start standing up a lot of the systems just by how they're spending dollars in the food that the government purchases. So huge role to play here, right? But in the end, farming and eating is a private sector endeavor for the most part. It's a relationship between growers and processors and manufacturers and retailers. And there's only so much that really can be done to shape that. It's not to absolve of the responsibility. I just think it's such a neat and convenient story, the ones we've been telling ourselves. And it actually leads us to the wrong set of answers. Like, the hard work is to shift what our culture cares about. Like, the reason our politics has left us short is because nobody votes on this issue. Nobody. The only response from the White House that's ever happened is just because Michelle Obama decided she cared about it. Not because voters were telling us that we should do it. It's like we were in the kitchen in Chicago talking about it. Like, that would be great if we did it. She felt in her own life she knew it was a really important issue for the nation's children, and so she decided to take it on. But it was not because we did some polling. We're like, this is going to resonate with our voters. And this is the reason why. And the same is true for climate. The reason why Kamala is not talking about climate change, in fact, sidestepping issues on climate, is because right now it's dropped in importance for voters. It's at number 11. So what do you want her to do? She can be on her soapbox all she wants and then lose Pennsylvania, and then that's it. And then we're really in trouble. So we got to do the work to get our culture to care about this, both from a consumer standpoint and from a politics standpoint. That would be the food movement. That's the movement. When we say the word movement, that's what it is. And that's the hard work that will then underpin the change we need in these two big systems that shape how we eat. So I think we made a lot of progress, but it's not scaling. Like, it's not becoming just the way that businesses are run. And I think it's because we're trying to shortcut that kind of hard, slow, tedious, hard to measure, not that fun work of setting up, like, what do we care about? Why do we care about it? Why does this make sense? Why do we have to do it? And it's a push-pull. So government will do some good stuff. They'll be pushed back. Businesses can do some good stuff. They'll step back. You know, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And I think that's the only way forward.
So you don't see there as being like a large-scale solution. It sounds like more like small initiatives from, I mean, Michelle Obama's initiative was not small. Do you think something like that can move the needle a lot, or is that?
Sure. Everything inherently, even big things are incremental when you're talking about an $11 trillion global food system that's feeding, you know, many billions of people every day. So even like big piece of technology that could be transformational is still going to touch one part of a very complicated system that has all kinds of players, and which, by the way, you know, part of the complication, and there's always these analogies, well, we did it for EV batteries, or government did this, like, yeah, but nobody really cares about the EV battery. Like, everybody cares about their food. And whether we like it or not, people love Big Macs. You guys may all think that's killing everybody, but man, do they love their Big Macs. And it's delicious. I haven't had one in a long time, but I used to eat them, and they're delicious. And so, like, everybody has a stake in these things. Everybody cares. Everybody has an informed opinion. We grow food in every state in the nation. Everybody's got a stake. So that means politically, things are, you know, they're pretty intracted. They're hard to move. And by the way, depending on who's in office, that's not always a bad thing. 4 years ago, you want them telling you what to eat? Like, okay? They were ordering fast food in the White House. One of the saddest days of my life. That's for whatever weird reason. Like, as bad as it all was, and there's way worse days, there was something so dark for me about that day. Where they're like serving Pizza Hut. I mean, it was like, it represented everything to me in such an intimate way. Anyway, I digress. Let's not go back there. You know, I think what Marion said is right. Like, we have to vote. We have to win. Like, the other thing is, like, we just have to win. Like, stop complaining how bad it is. Like, just get out there and win. Start putting points on the board. Be pragmatic, be strategic, and, like, let's start winning. I think we're getting cut off here. Danny just walked on the stage. She's like, shut up, that's enough. But I do, all right, one more second.
Yeah.
But I think it's really right. Like, we have to win, we have to organize, you have to start making these elections count, making our voices heard, and, like, throwing the people out of office who don't care about this stuff. Like, until we start doing that, we're only going to get so much out of, you know, both the companies who are feeding us and the policymakers who are shaping the policy. And so that's the work. Like, that's what it comes down to. And the solutions have to work in the economic realities that we're faced. Like, we have to grapple with that. I think so often we just think, last thing, Danny, that we think too much, like, oh, everybody's willing to pay a little more. People are not willing to pay a little more. The answers have to fit in the realities that we're dealing with. It's just the facts, as much as I wish they weren't true. And if we can get into those harsh realities and deal with, like, the trade-offs that inherently then come, I think we can make a lot of progress. I think if we stay sort of resistant to that, we're just going to be kind of around the edges of how we're really feeding ourselves. Sorry, Danny. I love you.
It's all good. Preach it, Sam Cass. That's all I can say. Thank you so much. Thank you, Stacey. Stacey, please stay where you are, if that's okay. You gotta get out of here, Sam. Come on. No, come on. Come on, my friend. Do you want me to come over and pick you up? You have to leave. You have to leave. Said Stacey. Okay, so up next, as Sam Cass leaves the room, I'm kidding, we have a great panel on food loss and waste and the solutions that are being implemented from college campuses to commercial kitchens. Stacey will again be the awesome moderator. Joining her, we have my board member, Regina Harmon, the executive director of the Food Recovery Network. Give it up for her. Mark Zorn's one of my other board members. It's nepotism here. The founder of Winnow. Give it up for him. Angel Vessa, the senior manager of innovation initiatives at ReFed. Do you want to join the board? And Ryan Began, the co-founder and CEO of Divert. And I'm going to invite him to the board tonight. Over to you, Stacey.
everyone. Thank you for talking about food waste. Angel, I thought I would start with you because you deal with a lot of data and information coming in, and I think that can be like a good way to set the stage for a conversation. So I'm wondering, as you're watching all this information and data coming in all the time, what is striking to you right now? What have we seen change? What is getting better, worse?
Sure,
What are you seeing?
I mean, what still strikes me is, as we all know, over a third of all food produced goes uneaten, and that costs us over $400 billion. So just that economic challenge there. But of course, we're all here also because we care about climate, and we were able to actually do some recent calculations around methane emissions, specifically as it relates to food waste across the food system. And we found that food waste is responsible for about 4 million metric tons of methane emissions. That's the equivalent of 14% of the methane emissions here in this country, which is a lot. And when we look at the solutions, we're finding that, yes, prevention is still important, and it's still going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. But if we want to rapidly reduce methane emissions, we need to divert food waste from landfills quickly. So we're talking about, centralized composting. We're talking about AED solutions because we need to divert it from landfill. And of course, again, prevention is still important, but it's going to take too long for those prevention solutions to create the impact that we're looking for now. So that's kind of the latest that we've been seeing with the data.
Mark, you deal in a lot of, I'm sorry.
I'm Ryan.
I'm sorry. You deal with a lot of like very solution-oriented approaches that different entities can take. I'm wondering what some of the solutions that you're seeing that are maybe the most exciting to you would be?
So we process about 800 million pounds per year of food waste. So that's food that can't be sold or donated from our grocery store partners that were otherwise going to landfill. To date, we have raised about $1.3 billion to build the solutions that Angel was referencing. But what's really cool about what we do, it's not that we are building solutions that are building out the infrastructure necessary. What's really cool is when you keep food waste out of landfill, you start to look at it differently. So when we implement a diversion program, and I think Mark will talk about what he's also doing, that data, that awareness that comes with a diversion program is absolutely critical. I was sharing with Angel, I have 4 kids. We separate our food waste at home, and it's incredibly educational for them to understand if it goes into the trash, it sort of disappears. It goes into this hole in the ground. It produces methane emissions, leachate, all of these terrible things. But when you separate it, you start to look at it differently. And they see the accumulation, like, wow, that's from like 3 days, 4 days, and then we're going to compost it together at our house. And so I think it's really a mosaic of solutions that is required to not only keep food waste out of landfill, but also drive that awareness in upstream source reduction. And making these things happen at the same time is incredibly difficult.
And you're using food waste to create fuel.
Correct.
Is that right?
So food waste today, because of all of our packaging, from Apple stickers to plastic clamshells, plastic has become inherent to our food. And the necessity is that we remove this before we recycle it. What we don't want to do is drive microplastics to land. We don't want to take one problem and move it to another area. So anaerobic digestion for us, it's a wet process. Food waste is 85% water. So really what we're talking about is keeping water out of landfills as well. And so it's a wet solution where we biologically break down food, keep the nutrients intact. We can rescue the water, and the carbon that's inside of our food, we are biologically converting that into renewable fuel. So we're offsetting all fossil fuels with what we can create, and it really starts to become a really interesting play where we can produce energy in areas that don't necessarily have access to energy. So Lexington, North Carolina, which is our next facility, we're generating renewable natural gas that's going to provide to that community and local food manufacturing and other industrial solutions.
Regina, your organization is a student-led organization, and you deal with food waste too, but it's more of a redirecting effort. Would you mind kind of describing what you do and the changes that you've seen?
I would love to, thank you. And as I'm talking, I would love to bring in the Lenape tribe into the conversation, and just to give a quick honor and recognition that we are on their lands, so with respect and with love. So I'm Regina, I'm the Executive Director of Food Recovery Network. It's an organization of about 200 college chapters across the United States. We were started by college students at the University of Maryland in 2011. It was the process of young people being on their college campus in academia, learning about some of the issues that we've discussed throughout the day, and all of you, incredible food tank supporters, that we hear about. But they weren't getting a lot of solutions. And so they were hearing about climate crisis. When I was growing up, it was, maybe climate change, but it was definitely climate crisis, going into climate emergency, global poverty, wars, what to do. And at the same time, a couple of the founders, they had work studies, and so they were, working on their dining halls. And at the end of their shift, they were directed to throw away all this really great food that at $4.58 was perfectly fine to purchase, but for some reason at $5.01 they had to throw it away. They were also volunteering out in their community, so yay to volunteers. And they saw the direct need, so they were participating in peanut butter and jelly sandwich making drives. They were participating, at soup kitchens, and they're like, yeah, this is really helpful. But wait a second, we have all of this really great food here. Why can't we just take this food over here and bring it to the people that we know are experiencing food insecurity? And so they devised a plan. They talked to their dining manager, who at first was like, I'm not talking to you. Didn't have time for them. And this is the beauty of people. They wouldn't take no for an answer. So they kept going to her day after day after day and said, hey, can we have a meeting? She finally heard them out. They told her name is Colleen. She's still in our corner to this day. They told Colleen their idea, and she said, oh my gosh, that's actually a really good idea. Okay. So the important swerve to all of this with their idea was that she gave them all the information that they needed to handle the food safely. So the food could be removed, prepared food, and they brought it to a church down the street from the University of Maryland. And then the beautiful thing is, again, the power of people, in particular the power of young people and the young at heart. They just started calling their friends all across the United States to say, hey, we're doing this at UMD, you should do it too. So they called their friends at Brown, Berkeley, Pomona, and that is how Food Recovery Network started. So one carload of food at a time. We are a local solution. We're a national organization with a local solution. So we have some chapters here in New York City. You might not have access to cars. We're all the way out in California, in the middle of the country. So every school is different. The rhythm of every school is slightly different, but at the center of all of it is this desire to feed people who are unnecessarily experiencing food insecurity.
Mm-hmm. And Mark, you look at different ways that food gets wasted because it's not the same process all over the world. There are certain things like, I know you've looked at like cold chain is an issue in some areas, and other areas it's not. What are some of the biggest challenges, I guess, that you see as you're sort of looking at different places and different ways to solve food waste issues in different parts of the world?
Yeah, so Windows is a technology company. We help provide data for chefs to be able to understand and prevent food waste. The issue of food waste in kitchens, commercial kitchens, is that about 10 to 20% of the food that gets purchased ends up getting thrown away, which honestly, when I first got into it and started digging into it, the question I was like, why? Because these are businesses that are low margin, need to be able to make a profit. Why is it that this happens? And particularly in sort of large scale operations, there's just a lot of people, everyone's very, very busy. They don't track food waste because actually tracking it and understanding it is difficult. And so what we do is we use computer vision to analyze what's being thrown away in real time, and we give data to chefs to help them understand what they can do to prevent it. We work in over 80 countries around the world. Today our clients are saving over $70 million a year in food being thrown away. What we see around the world, honestly, is I think first of all it starts from food waste around there is a desire to be hospitable. There is a desire to sort of put the best out for your guests and for people to come into your restaurant. And sometimes that leads to unintended consequences where too much food is produced. by giving people data to then make changes around how to drive that down, they're able to address that. We did some work with Hilton, where we looked at something called the green breakfast, right? Sort of every hotel around the world has a breakfast. And what we demonstrated in this project was that you could actually reduce food waste by making some simple changes around how food was produced, driving more data understanding in the kitchen, and actually sort of changing how you laid out certain foods in a breakfast buffet, for example. And we cut food waste by about 64% in those operations. And sort of now that's serving as a template of how they might think about scaling that up. And so, while I think, we work in the UAE, we work in Asia, there's lots of different cultural factors that drive it, but it's that common sense of needing and wanting to be hospitable, putting the best foot forward to your guests, to your diners, while also having a very busy, chaotic kitchen that sort of comes together to be able to cause that problem.
Do most of your clients engage you because they're interested in saving money, or is it because they are interested in the issue of running a more environmentally friendly business?
We get our foot in the door with the heart of food waste as a problem and something that environmentally you want to get after. We scale with organizations because it makes economic sense, right? Because there's actually a really strong return on investment in doing that. It's been proven many times, on average, it's anywhere between a 2 to 10x return on investment for investing in food waste prevention technology.
So it's not the money that necessarily gets people in the door. I ask because I'm wondering if we're going to see real change. It does seem like companies either need to have really the will to change, or they need to feel like it's to their advantage in some way. So I'm wondering what your all experiences have been, and feel free to jump in, but where the interest is coming from, if it's that they want to save money and they see an opportunity there, or if they care, or if it's optics, or why people are maybe going to make changes, starting to make changes.
I'll speak for us. I think from our customers, which are nearly every major retailer in the country we service on a nationwide basis, it starts with the boardroom, which really is the shareholder. It's their employees, it's the engagement that we see, and the value proposition starts to change. So we're paid about, on average, 6 cents per pound that we manage. The value of that food is about $1.75. So retailers are already incentivized to sell that food. The hard part is, we're talking about chaos. There could be up to 200 employees that work at a single grocery store. The amount of volume that they're turning over, having food on the shelves, slips, trips, and falls, things happening in the parking lot, these are all issues that they're trying to contend with. At the same time, deliver fresh food so that you're visiting their store because it's an ultra competitive, low margin business. So for someone to think, well, I'm also going to try to do everything I can to squeeze that pack of strawberries and bring it to the back room and cut it, where that employee may be making minimum wage, is not thinking in the best interest of the business, or maybe in the best interest of sustainability. So it's awareness and driving these things. It starts with education. It starts with people caring and putting their dollars where they see that value. And we're seeing that change. We are absolutely enterprise-led across the country. We are more successful in the southeast of the United States than we are in California. We get paid more in the southeast than we do in California. So why? Because we are one of the only solutions that exist in the market. There's a pull into that market for those solutions to exist. So there is a lot of change happening very quickly across the US from our perspective.
Maybe I'll just add to that, and I'll take a different approach. So just to take a step back, in my role, I manage our Catalytic Grant Fund, and we recently did an open call focused on solutions for restaurants, specifically independent restaurants, so not necessarily chains. And much like what Mark and Ryan are saying, is I was a chef, and it is insane in the back of house. And chefs get into the business because they love food. They really care about it, so they don't want to waste it. So when we were starting to work with these restaurants to pilot the solutions that our grantees have to offer, it was coming in first about so passionately not wanting to waste food. But what we learned is, because it's so chaotic, these solutions need to be simple, convenient. They need to not disrupt operations at all. And those are the types of solutions we funded, and that's what actually is getting into these restaurants and driving adoption of solutions. So I would say those are the three things we really looked for.
When you say that chefs really care about food, a lot of restaurants are not necessarily chef vision driven. Certainly, like in New York and Brooklyn, there are a lot of chefs who really care about food, but a lot of restaurants across the country are chain restaurants or very focused on the bottom line and things like that. Are you still seeing the same interest there, or is that a completely different?
I would say it's a bit of a different beast.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. I would say it's actually more similar to what Mark sees, where it is coming in and looking at how can we drive operational efficiency. So it's still about reducing waste, but now we're talking about it from an efficiency and cost-saving standpoint with chains.
Can I just add, though, I think that you can shift that dynamic in those operations. Maybe not necessarily a fast food restaurant where you're really executing. But the favorite story I had today was Marriott, another customer of ours. There's a video on LinkedIn of David Marriott, who's the chairman, doing a recipe with one of the chefs we work with about a banana peel burger that's actually being served in the UK. And it's not to say that banana peel burgers need to be the norm, but I think that when you start to think about the food as the ingredient as something you can really be creative with and make the most of the products coming into it, and when you inspire people about that, that's when you win the hearts of the chefs who may work in these large organizations, but really then excite them to be able to drive that change.
I would say from our perspective, to your question, we see it on both sides at Food Recovery Network. On the student side, in terms of money, and money being the driver, at this point, if 44 million people are food insecure, that is a policy decision that we believe is the wrong decision. It's inhumane. And so our students will take 45 minutes to package up food and bring it to a church, a school, after school program. It doesn't really matter. So that is just the humanness of sharing food. We should not be throwing it away, period. And we can do those small acts of kindness. On the other side, at Food Recovery Network, we have a program called Food Recovery Verified, where we do work with businesses and large-scale events to help them think through their own food recovery programs. And we're seeing all kinds of things. A lot of times, people think, oh, we have food, and so here you can take our food. And we're like, okay, are you going to pay for the transportation? And we pay, people's time to do this. And they're like, oh, whoa. And then we think, okay, you can do this now and pay a nonprofit a very small fee, or as New York goes, as California goes, when you have to start paying thousands of dollars to do this, it's not so inexpensive of a proposition. It just matters, I think, where, every budget is slightly different, but the idea that it's not going to cost money, we have to get rid of that. But with tax incentives, with understanding how much food you're ordering in the first place, there is a huge opportunity to recapture a lot of money that's on the table that I think a lot of companies, it's that murky middle that they just aren't looking at right now. But we hope to, get people's attention to that money on the table.
You are all working with organizations of different kinds and sizes and scales, and I'm wondering if you see the elimination of food waste as something that's really driven by smaller independent businesses and organizations, or if there's also a role for big kind of multinational companies. I'm wondering what your experience has been.
I think it's driven by the bottom line. I think it's driven by awareness. When you are a CPG and you're Driscoll Strawberry, you're delivering strawberries and there's swell baked into your costs with those retailers. That food supply chain is incredibly complex. And then you see on the back end, Driscoll Strawberries being thrown into the trash. So I think that incentive structure is just sort of common sense. I think it's part of the education, the awareness that's starting to come out more because of groups like Food Tank, that people want to do better. Giving them the simple solutions, like Angel was saying, it is really important. Giving them the data that Mark's talking about is also important, so what gets measured gets managed, and that's really important within these systems as well.
I mean, we're working with large organizations solely because we think that's the first port of call to drive scale. When large organizations make commitments to reduce food waste, then they need to talk about it in their annual reports, and then they need to deliver on that, right? To be able to deliver on that, they need tools to be able to really make that work across their organizations. So to answer your question, I think it comes from both sides. What I can speak to is I can speak to large organizations. Groups like IKEA have cut their food waste in half. Guggenheimer ISS's U.S. Food Services, one of the largest food service operators in the U.S., just announced this week that they've cut their food waste in half. So what we're starting to see some of these organizations that made those commitments now delivering on that. Now what we need is the other organizations that have made those commitments to pony up the money, get serious about it, and actually make it happen.
I mean, the last thing I'll add to that, we also work with big companies also. So ReFed, in partnership with World Wildlife Fund, has been leading the U.S. Food Waste Pact, which has leading companies across different industries. Walmart is a member, so is Chick-fil-A. But it's a great way to bring these big players to drive impact in a pre-competitive way, because big companies have big impact.
Mm-hmm. And we work with everyone. Big, small. We have a chapter that every Saturday they literally go to the bagel shop and get like a bag full of bagels to donate to their food partner. And then we work with all the big guys too. But Gen Z, millennials, the largest population of people, in the United States right now, they're looking, and these are the expectations that they have, that let's cut, the gig is up. We have to stop throwing food away.
You're here.
I feel like there are a lot of aspects of food that are connected to climate, and food waste is not usually one of the most talked about. I'm wondering, maybe, and all of you have dedicated a lot of time and enterprise to this cause. I'm wondering why this should be at the top of mind when we're talking about food and climate. Why should food waste be in that conversation?
Oh, for us, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, the students that started FRN, the students that continue to drive FRN, born into this world that it doesn't make any sense that we're treating our earth so poorly. And so it just is a way that we have to begin to manage our beautiful resources better, and we have the skill sets to do that. We think we have the will to do that, and it is just about providing that gentle ways to others around us. We're not so much wagging our fingers at anyone. We've had people come and say, oh my gosh, we have no idea how to tackle our food waste. And we say, come on in, we can help you with this. But if it is going to take all of our water, all of our extra fertilizer, all of these extra resources, we must be better stewards of this. Because here's the thing. The way that the environment is right now, Mother Earth is telling us something. And when we can stop wasting food, the third largest emitter of CO2 gases, we're not an elastic band. We're not gonna snap back to the way things were when I was growing up. What we have right now is what we're gonna have for the next several generations, before all of us are gone. So what we have right now is what we've created. And so what we're asking people is, please, let's not make it any worse. We can change this now and make this, we can still adapt, to what we have right now. Plus, hey, we get to share some bread with others around us. All right, I'm in.
I'm wondering if there's something happening now that maybe makes you especially,
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
And especially because my board members are up here. Ballsy, right? Stacy, thank you so much. Give a round of applause to these great panelists. And to Stacy, who really pulled double duty. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a great afternoon. I'm going to move. Sorry. I got befuddled. It's been a wonderful afternoon. I'm so glad you all are still here. There's a great reception to follow, so do not leave. And you wouldn't want to anyway, because we have, Alice Waters here, a woman who needs no introduction. Please give her a round of applause. One of my very favorite people in the world. I know she's the favorite person of many people in this room, so I'm excited to sit down with her. But just for those of you who might not know her, she's a chef, author, advocate, and the founder and owner of the restaurant Chez Panisse in Berkeley, California. She's also the recipient of the 2024 Julia Child Award. Please give her a round of applause. So you're my only panelist who's brought a prop, and we'll get to that in a minute, but I'm excited to talk about it. But I want you to start with your story, Alice, because for you it all started with the restaurant and your connection to taste and flavor and really farmers.
Well, it really started in the free speech movement in Berkeley, California, because
Yeah, I'll move it a little bit out. Ricardo's coming to help.
He's coming.
He's our savior right now. Thank you. Thank you. Oh. Thank you, Ricardo. I'm so sorry. All right, we're good. Thank you. Free speech movement in California.
Yes, but Mario Savio was leading that movement, and all of these people were in Sparrow Plaza, and I had never sort of experienced the power of people who really felt passionate about an idea. And Mario Savio was very intent about education. And he thought no one should decide on a major right in your freshman year, that you needed to learn about what you loved to do, wanted to study. And during the free speech movement, we weren't allowed to, he said, don't go to classes that have professors that aren't part of this movement. So I took Beethoven's symphonies and astronomy and a lot of other odd subjects. But he said the best thing is to take a year off and go to another country and learn about their culture. And so I took off my junior year and went to France. The rest is history.
Literally.
But I have to say that it was a true slow food nation. They didn't have even olive oil in Paris. That was the south of France. I know a lot of people have heard me talk about this before, but it was profound because everything I ate tasted delicious. And I had wild strawberries. And they said, one day they disappeared. I said, what happened to them? They said, it's over. You have to go up in the woods to pick them. And they only grow for this month in the fall. And we wait till next year to have them. But that's the way I ate in Paris. And there were little fixed price menus that were very inexpensive at that time. And I always ordered them because they were choosing things for me that I'd never tasted. And they all tasted good. And I went back there. But when I came home, I really wanted to live like the French. I didn't just want to eat like the French. I wanted to, walk around town. I wanted to see farmers markets at every corner. I wanted to sit by the Seine. I wanted to go to museums for free and concerts. I wanted to live like that. And thank God we were in proximity to the University of California. And so I made it a point to invite people who were coming to speak there to come to Chez Panisse. And we had amazing people from around the world. Yo-Yo Ma, the Dalai Lama. But that was fascinating, too, when he came. He was speaking at the university, and I wanted to know what he wanted to eat. And we wanted to make exactly what he wanted to eat. And so I thought it was beet time. It was in the February, and maybe we'd have golden and red beets. And I had thought, is he a vegetarian? What would he like to eat? Right. Well, I found out that he liked lamb. And so we made him a lamb stew, but he didn't eat vegetables that were grown under the ground. And I made that big mistake. But he was so forthcoming, and we had a number of people that were such part of his whole movement at the restaurant, and they were so thrilled that he came. They wanted to touch every table he touched, take his chair, take his glass. I'm getting far away from what I'm...
I think it really relates to what we've heard all day, which
Yes.
is the power of people.
And the power of food, delicious food. Who would have thought that only one menu, and mind you, it was cheap, $3.50 for 4 courses. But nonetheless, I didn't understand about taste until I met Bob Kennard, who was an organic regenerative farmer. And he was very outspoken, and he said his vegetables were 25% more nutritious than anybody else's. And I laughed, and they were. And he said, I want to pick up all your food compost at the restaurant, and you can take the vegetables back. And I said, I'll pay you the real cost of those vegetables. There was no middleman taking the money. It was just directly from Bob. Well, the word got out in California that we were doing this, and hundreds of people wanted to sell to us. We got Moto's peaches in the fall, and we had certain Bronx grapes from this person and that person. And people would say, I want, when do I come for Moss's peaches? I said, maybe 1 month, maybe 2 months in the fall. And so that made me, believe in the power of taste. It made me understand a food system when you're buying locally, all locally produced food. And it inspired people to go into the farming and the ranching and the fishing business. I loved it that we had somebody who went and picked their mussels right up from Mendocino and brought them into the restaurant that day. And when we served them, everybody was just breathless about the way they tasted. And I know we were breaking the rules, but I believe in breaking the rules when they're wrong.
Right on.
And rules about food safety, so many are wrong. They are not making the right rules about the food that is good for us. And everybody who spoke today talked around that, but didn't say that the health of the soil is what gives our food the nutrition that we need. And there's so many wonderful people who have written about that. And so my plan is, and because I started the Edible Schoolyard Project 30 years ago.
Round of applause for that, everyone.
And I started it in one middle school because the principal called me and he said, I hear you like gardens and maybe you could come and beautify my school. You made a bad comment about it in the paper that we were neglecting our public school system. And it had a barbed wire fence around it, a chain link fence. And it was a very big school, 800 to 1,000 students, middle school students. And it had been built on 21 acres of land way back in the teens. And so there was a huge lot, a vacant lot that was just full of junk. And I went and I talked to him. And Montessori teacher that I am, I know that our senses are the pathways into our minds. And I'm sure you all know about her work in the 1880s, first woman doctor in Italy. And she wanted to know why children who lived in poverty and hunger didn't learn like other students. And so she discovered that all of our senses, smell and taste and touch and how you look at things and hearing are what are going right into our brains. And she felt like these children were sensorily deprived. Well, I'm afraid I think we live in a sensorily deprived world. We're on our computer instead of looking at the redwood trees. And being outside is engaging our senses. And food uses all of them. The beauty of the produce, of everything, the herbs, it's just unimaginable that we get to have that food. And so I want a system where the farmer is first, the rancher, the farmer. And just the way we bought food from the restaurant, we could do that in the schools. By the way, Neil Smith, the principal of the school, I said, Neil, I see a garden classroom over on that one. Yeah. I see a kitchen classroom and that portable building over there. And out in the middle of the asphalt, I see a whole cafeteria that could serve all of the 800 kids in the school in 2 seatings. And not to waste time, we could make school lunch an academic subject. You could be sitting at the table, all the students together, and you're discovering geography, and it's a placemat that you have, and I have some here if you want to see, about the Middle East. And you could be eating pita bread and hummus and greens. Who knew that kids would like that?
It's amazing. It's
Who
amazing.
knew? I mean, it's amazing. So we started that project. It wasn't to teach cooking or farming. It was to teach all the academics subjects in an interactive classroom. And I'll tell you, it has worked like a charm. Because these are human values. You have to hold up that side. It's in 60 to 100 schools around.
That's so beautiful, Alice.
Show the other side too. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing.
Show that side because it's more impressive when you see it.
It's pretty cool, Alice. It's pretty cool.
A good idea is what we all need right now. And I just want to say that Terra Madre, Carlo Petrini Slow Food Movement is meeting in Torino right at this time. And he wants to have a Terra Madre big event in California next year. They want to have a real global gathering in California. But I am doing an event that you're all invited to. It's called Climate Food Hope. I wanted something really hopeful before the election. And I have been working with the institute I have formed to talk about school-supported agriculture. What if we use the money of the school system, already exists, and give it to the farmers, the ranchers, the fishers who live locally? No imported food. to everybody who produces it. It brings the community together. It really is like the Edible Schoolyard Project. Parents come and they help with the gardening all the time. It became a center. Every year we do a teaching, just one teaching. But we know that it works in every climate. And people have been invited to this event from all around the country, people like Michael Pollan and Eric Schlosser. But I wanted the president of the University of California to come because I felt like if UC system made this a reality, that it would go across the country and around the world. So he signed the letter that I have on the back. And maybe I should just read this at the end.
Of course.
Or
Do you want me to read it?
Yes.
So it says, we are pleased to invite you to an important gathering where we will present the idea of school-supported agriculture as a powerful and universal climate solution. Our ambitious goal is to build a global food movement where all public schools and universities buy their food directly from local, regenerative, organic farmers, ranchers, and food purveyors. We believe this dramatic shift in procurement is an effective and immediate way to mitigate climate change, address children's health, educate our next generation, and bring our communities together. Bravo, Alice. It's amazing. It's happening. What is the day? What is the day? October 19th, 2024. October 19th, everyone.
Very soon.
So exciting.
We will have something on a website for the Institute. And I wanted it to be on the mall and have hundreds of farmers and teachers sitting at the table as our most valuable citizens. We should be encouraging people who love children to teach them. And I think ever since ketchup became a vegetable in the schools,
oh gosh,
that we have gone downhill. But we certainly know what we're serving our children is not good for them. Absolutely, we know. And we know all of the pioneers around the country and around the world who know that when students are engaged in making their own food, that they all eat it.
It's so powerful.
All eat it.
So powerful.
And you're all invited to come to the Edible
They're all going to
Schoolyard.
show up, Alice. Are you ready?
But there are a number of edible schoolyards in New York City. We wanted to have proof of concept. There's a beautiful one in Brooklyn. They're all around. There's one up in Harlem. But we made one in New Orleans. We did one in upstate New York, just to make sure that in a big city or a cold climate or a hot place or a different culture, that it would work. And it does. And we're not taking away from the academic curriculum.
It's so
very
wonderful.
important that we're teaching to the standards.
Alice, thank you for putting students at the center of this, or the children of this country and around the world, because this is a message that can spread. And thank you for putting farmers, ranchers, fishers, food producers at the center of all this. We are sadly out of time. I know we could talk forever, but thank you for all of this work that you have done. You are my heroine in a million different ways, and you are so many people's heroine, because you have brought this message forward of seasonality, of taste, of culture, of investing in children, investing in farmers and food producers. It's delicious and it's powerful.
Well, thank you, my dear. But it's never worked for me. I never think of it. And I believe that one of the most unfortunate thing that's happened in this country is that people are doing work that is not meaningful. And there's nothing more meaningful, really, than planting a seed and seeing it grow. And also really the being out in nature, being with children who just want to learn. You know, it's so gratifying.
It is so gratifying. Thank you, Alice Waters.
Thank you,
Round of
guys.
applause. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I can't get up either. Thank you. I messed up my whole stage. Give her a standing ovation, please. Thank you, Alice Waters. This was the perfect way to end Climate Week, at least for me. Thank you, Alice, for everything that you have done. Thank you again to WNYC for having us, during their 100-year anniversary. We're so honored to be here. Thank you to all of the Food Tank team. Thank you to all of the partners who came together today. I am so honored to have had this event with all of you. Give yourselves a round of applause, and happy Climate Week, everyone.